Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third meeting on the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor. I'm so excited to see everyone here in person. It's our first in-person committee meeting for this subcommittee. Ms. Rowe, would you please call the roll?
Senator Lang.
Here.
Senator Settlemyre.
Here.
Senator Spearman.
Senator Spearman.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill for Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
And Chair Howdicke.
Here. Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Would you please mark Vice Chair present when she arrives? Thank you. Members, we have a quorum. Before we begin, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. First, I would like to remind everyone to please silence all of your electronic devices during the meeting. For members or presenters joining online, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, but please leave your camera on. Additionally, I ask our presenters on the Zoom video call to leave your cameras off and microphones muted until I call the agenda item on which you are under. The Zoom video call has a chat feature. I would like to remind anyone on the Zoom to not use the chat feature for any questions or links. The chat feature is only to be used for technical assistance with BPS. The committee's meeting materials can be found on the Nevada Legislature's website. If you wish to testify in person, please sign in at the table by the door and leave a business card. If you do not testify, you may also wish to sign in so that there is a record of who is interested in a particular topic. When testifying in person, please turn the microphone button on to speak and off to listen. We have listeners and viewers in Carson City and online. We are recording this meeting and it will be available on the legislature's website. We have public comment period at the beginning of the meeting as well as at the end, and public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. In addition to testifying in person, members of the public may provide public comment in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. You can email comments to the committee's email, mail them to the research division, or fax in your comments as well, and call in by dialing 669-900-6833, entering the meeting ID 838-6215-1088, followed by the pound sign. With that, we will move on to our first agenda item, which is agenda item 2, public comment. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. It is my intention as chair to take 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning and the remainder of public comment at the end of the meeting. We will start with public comment from those in physical locations and then move to public comment on the phone. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas who wishes to provide public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City who wishes to provide public comment at this time? BPS, could we check the telephone lines for anyone who wishes to give public comment via the telephone line?
Yes, Chair. If you'd like to give public comment, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you. Okay. And Ms. Rowe, if you could note for the record that Vice Chair Spearman has joined the committee meeting. Welcome, Vice Chair. Okay. Members, with that, we can move on to our next agenda item 3, which is approval of the minutes for the meeting on January 11th and February 1st. Can I take these? Can I take these together? Yep. Okay, we will take them together. If no one has questions or changes for either of the meeting minutes, we could take one motion and approve both sets of meetings together. I would be looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the committee meeting on January 11th and February 1st, 2022.
So moved.
I have a first by Senator Lang, a second by Vice Chair Spearman. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, members, moving right along to agenda item number 4, an overview of the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. Today we will hear from Dieter, and their presentation is broken up into 3 different sections. We have with us Director Elisa Caffaretta and her staff. Dieter has been in the spotlight during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the department provides more than unemployment benefits. It is also the lead workforce development agency in the state. It offers workforce development and related assistance, job placement and training services for people with disabilities, investigates claims of discrimination, and so much more. Director Caffaretta, thank you for joining us. When you are ready, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction. Pretty much covers everything. I'm just kidding. Elisa Caffaretta, for the record, Director of Dieter. I am joined in the room by my Deputy Directors, Chris Sewell, who is the Deputy Director over the operations part of the House, and LaTanya Coleman, who is our Deputy Director. And I told her there used to be 3 seats here, so we didn't mean to have her not sitting up at front. She is the Deputy Director for the program part of the Dieter House, and we have several of our staff members online to zoom in if we get into any areas where I need help to phone a friend. So this morning, in the first agenda item, we're going to give you an overview of the big picture look at how we rose to the challenge of the pandemic, and which is on the next slide, and I can't see them in front of me, so may take a little coordination here. How we dealt with the pandemic, how we've been moving to pivot towards workforce services, what we're doing to improve our services now, and sort of the larger projects that we're working on to fix things that did not work so well in the future. Dieter is an agency that is counter-cyclical in many ways. Our work is completely dependent on the economic conditions. When we're facing an economic disruption, of course, we focus on the unemployment services, and when the economy is rebounding, we're focused on workforce development and the other side of the house. So we wanted to start this morning with a high-level update on economic conditions, just so you can see where we are. And we're joined by David Schmidt, who is our economist and chief of our research and analysis division, to give you that high-level overview.
Thank you very much, Director. For the record, my name is David Schmidt. I'm the Chief Economist for the Research and Analysis Bureau within Dieter. While I could talk about the state of the economy at length, in the interest of time, I just want to hit a couple really high-level points. First, as you can see from the chart that's up on the slide, Nevada's employment level has nearly recovered where we were prior to the pandemic. Currently, we stand at about a little over 1.4 million jobs. We are currently down just 15,500 jobs from where we were prior to the start of the pandemic, which means we're getting to the point where a couple of good months could put us over the top there. Recently, we added about 6,000 jobs over the month in February. At that pace, it would take a couple more months. In January, it was about 3,000 jobs, so maybe more like 5 months, but we're within striking distance of where we were employment-wise prior to the start of the pandemic. In February, our unemployment rate was 5.1%. Both of these measures, the number of jobs we've added over the last year, as well as the improvement we've seen in our unemployment rate over the past year, in February, we're number 1 in the nation. And it wasn't even close for number 2. We were more than a full percentage point ahead of the number 2 state in terms of employment growth. We've seen similar improvement in our unemployment rate. And if you want to go to the next slide, you can see that number highlighted. Number 1 in the nation for employment growth, number 1 in the nation for unemployment rate improvement, number 1 in the nation for the index of state economic momentum. This is a quarterly data point that was released last week that our employment, population, and personal income growth all wrapped together was the best in the country. Context for this is Nevada was hit hard by the pandemic. We had more room to make up. The good news is we are, in fact, making up that that gap. We are seeing strong gains in employment, strong improvement in our unemployment rate. And so that, I think, sets a lot of the context for the other things that are happening within DETR. And to not talk at too much length, I'd be happy to hand it back over to the director.
Thank you. Elisa Cafretta for the record. So we can go to the next slide. Basically, as the chair pointed out, all of the work that DETR does is focused on the workforce and creating a vibrant workforce for the state. Our programs cover quite a wide range of services. So really we're focused on creating a vibrant and equitable workforce and economy for all Nevadans. You can see by our org chart on the next slide, the three main divisions that we have are employment security, which has both unemployment, workforce development, the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, and the Commission on Post-Secondary Education. Our rehabilitation division has 4 branches: Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, services to persons who are blind or visually impaired, the Bureau of Disability Adjudication, and the Blind Business Enterprises of Nevada. And those are largely focused on workforce and employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And then the Nevada Equal Rights Commission focuses on ensuring that there are not discriminatory practices in employment, housing, public accommodations, and they provide outreach and training for businesses and communities to make sure that those laws are being followed in the state. And we're supported by our administrative team that has finance, IT, research and analysis, and human resources. So just wanted to talk a little bit about our agency and our programs and sort of what we went through in the last 2 years. When people talk to me about taking on this position, I have to always give credit to the DETR team. The folks who work at DETR worked tirelessly. I don't think any of them had a weekend for the first year of the pandemic, and they're still working long hours and overtime to get through all of the backlog that was created during the pandemic. We're starting to see a lot of change, which I consider very positive at DETR. We have about 900 employees. We are seeing our staff being hired by other agencies, which is very encouraging because it's nice to see these super dedicated folks get promotions and go to work in other agencies and see their talents recognized. Some of them are finally taking long overdue retirements, and we appreciate the fact that they stuck with us through the pandemic. I'm most excited about the promotions. Almost a quarter of our workforce, these are folks who are dedicated to the agency, moving up. They're committing their talents and moving into new leadership positions for the agency. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of new energy. We're very excited about that. We're also quite excited to have some breathing room to work on diversity and equity initiatives. We have applied for an equity grant that is specifically working on addressing equitable access to our services, particularly in unemployment. And we are partnering with the Office of New Americans on implementation of both SB 222 and 318, which are the diversity and the language access bills from the last legislative session. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us on that. The left-hand side of the slide really was just my math, so you can ignore that. The highlights on the next 2 slides really are, it didn't work all flawlessly, but at the end of the day, almost 500,000 claimants received over $8 billion in benefits in 2020, with over 10 million benefit weeks paid. And then if you go to 2021, you started seeing people go back to work as things opened up. So 267,000 claimants received over $5 billion in benefits, 6 million almost 7 million benefit weeks paid. So that was sort of the part that went right. Those folks, were able to stay in their homes, have health care, take care of their families. So on the next slide that's up, basically, you can see that we paid out over $14 billion in unemployment benefits during the pandemic to 668,939 claimants. I think many of you heard that we got over 2 million applications for unemployment assistance. There are only about 1.5 million workers in the workforce. So at the very high level, what that lets you know is we stopped over 1.2 million fraudulent or imposter applications from getting benefits. Not to say that there weren't some improperly paid claims. There certainly were, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. We didn't have all the tools we needed. But by and large, we just want you to see at the high level the amazing work that the team did, getting the benefits to the people that needed them by and large, and stopping the benefits that shouldn't go out. What you can see from the different colors of the different programs that were paid was at the beginning of the pandemic, most of the benefits were being paid from the trust fund, which is dollars that our employers have put in. And over time, it moved to programs that were supported by the federal government almost entirely. So when you hear about the amount of money we paid out in benefits, the next question is, how is the trust fund doing? And the trust fund is in a healthy position right now. This is sort of an internal metric that we use, which is tracking in real time, us keeping an eye on when do we need to borrow money. So what this chart shows you is at the average weekly benefit amount that we're paying out, how many weeks will it take to exhaust the trust fund? And you can see at the beginning, prior to the pandemic hitting, we had about $2 billion in the trust fund. So if it were a regular week, it would have taken us years to exhaust the trust fund. But of course, it wasn't remotely like a regular week's payment. Just to put that number in perspective, that $2 billion that we had in the trust fund, all those weeks we were covered, if we had been paying out at the Great Recession rate, we would have had about 1.5 years of money in the trust fund to pay out benefits. But as we all know, it wasn't that kind of a recession. So money still comes in, even though the trust fund itself was depleted. So we did not end up borrowing. So we had the money at the beginning to pay benefits. We ended up borrowing in December of 2020. And that's a mechanism that's been in place since the 1930s to make sure people can continue to get their unemployment benefits without interruption. So we borrowed through most of 2021. Thanks to the legislature and the governor approving funds for repayment of the trust fund, we were able in September of 2021 to repay the $333 million we had borrowed. We were able to repay that before we started being charged interest by the federal government on that money. So we are deeply grateful that we were able to make that payment and put Nevada back on solid footing. As you can see, the weeks of sort of expected benefit payments have been adding up since then. So we have about a year's worth of benefits in the trust fund currently. We did decide not to increase the average rate for the tax that we charge employers. This is the second year we've done that. So we're not rebuilding with sort of great haste, but we understand that businesses are still rebuilding. So it's just going to take us a little bit longer than if we were a little more aggressive on those rates. But we think overall it's about 5 years to get back to the trust fund being in the position that it was before the pandemic, which we think is the appropriate level. So we're ready for the next turbulence in the economy. We're rebuilding, and we do have sort of tools should something happen that's completely unexpected to be able to help people. So there's several efforts underway. We do know, and you heard from all the people where the the system didn't work flawlessly. We had a lot of folks that just couldn't get through, a lot of new programs, a lot of new computer programming had to be set up. So we want to be sure in the future that we are prepared for the requirements of those kinds of disruptions that require a scale up that is overnight and immediate, that would have been unthinkable before COVID. And we also are looking for a new system that will be able to add new programs. There were 6 new unemployment benefit programs created by Congress in the first year of the pandemic. I don't think anybody's system was really set up to create and implement and stand up and staff 6 new programs. I don't expect that to not happen in the future. I think Congress will always try to respond to the unique needs of the economic situation. So we've also included in our modernization RFP the idea that you need to be able to stand up new programs, scale them up in very rapid order. So again, thanks to the legislature and the governor, we have $54 million set aside for modernization. This is ARP money, so it needs to be spent on a fairly aggressive timeline because that money has a limited duration that it can be spent. As you can see, we are stepping up to that timeline. The Board of Examiners approved a contract to help us develop the RFP. That RFP was developed from August until February when we published it. We're expecting the bids back at the end of this week. We hope to have a projected notice of award in June with approval from the BOE in August. That's really ambitious, but we're hoping we put enough in the front end of the RFP to make those goals with a kickoff with the vendor that will actually create the modernization in August. And the money needs to be obligated and the project substantially completed by December of 2024. And again, the team really rose to the occasion. There were literally 3, 4, 5 meetings a day from different subject matter experts, over 140 meetings to develop the RFP, 20 to 50 subject matter experts in each meeting. So it was all hands on deck to make sure we had the right brains in the room. The features and the priorities include a modern system that is client-centered, scalable, nimble and adaptive, has fraud-resistant tools that we need, and is basically as future-proof as we can make it with as much looking forward as we possibly can. But we're not waiting for the modernization to be finished to improve our systems. We're working with the Department of Labor. We have 2 large initiatives with one is Tiger Teams and one is the Equity Grant, which I mentioned. So these are some of you can see the list, I won't read it to you. These are some of the initiatives that we are putting in place to improve our business processes, the services that are available, especially around the issues of access in language and disability, so that we can make our services more available to more folks. Also, we have quite a few fraud protection investments that we are making. So we're really looking to make the improvements now that we can make even before we get to modernization. So that is, I don't have a really great concluding slide, but those are the initiatives we went through. Really the worst of the worst in the pandemic. The team came through with flying colors. We're fixing what we can fix now, and we have some big projects coming up to address sort of the major structural issues that we dealt with during the pandemic. So with that, we will conclude this presentation and
Before we jump into the second presentation, Director Cafaretta, I think I'd like to take questions from the members regarding this first portion.
Great.
I know we have questions from down here as well, Senator Settlemyre up north, but I'd like to just let the members know, we did notice that there was some discrepancies in the printouts that were handed to us and what was shown. I think it was when we opened it in the software system here at LCB and printed it, so we will get updated printouts sent to everyone. But you can also find that on the Legislative Committee's website, the same one, just when it printed out with different numbers. I have a couple of questions, Director Cafaretta, before I turn it over to the members. I know in the initial slide, I think it was slide 2, where it was going over the employment economic overview. On slide 7, it had mentioned that Nevada is again number 1 in over the year employment growth. Do we keep statistics as to what industries that growth is happening? Do you know where the majority of the growth is happening? What sectors?
Elisa Cafaretta for the record, and hopefully Dave is on as well. We do keep track, so I'm going to turn it over to Dave and he can give you the highlights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a good question, and it's really interesting because typically you might think like we've recovered the jobs that we've lost. That's not really the case. We have some industries that are well ahead of where they were, some industries that are further from recovery. The industry that's the furthest from recovery is the casino, hotel, and accommodation industry. That industry remains down about 30,000 jobs compared to where it was prior to the pandemic. In contrast, the trade, transportation, and warehousing industry, which includes retail trade, wholesale trade, and transportation and warehousing industries, is about 20,000 jobs higher than it was prior to the pandemic. And so the details is something we could share and provide, but there's a number of industries that have grown beyond where they were at the pandemic. Really, the casino hotel industry is the one that remains pretty significantly below where it was prior to the pandemic. Just about every other industry is either at or above where it was for the most part.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I appreciate that. And then just one last question from me. I know you had mentioned it would take us about 5 years to get back to pre-pandemic levels. Dr. Cafaretta, is that like from today, like you think 5 years from today to get back in the trust fund?
Dave Schmidt is our trust fund expert too, so I'll let you hear from him. Thanks.
Thank you again. And yes, that would be from, not necessarily like today, but from the last time that we ran this and went through the process in October for setting the rates for 2022. So that's 5 years probably from about October of 2021 if we wanted to be really tight on the timing there.
Okay, and I do have one last question, and Director, Mr. Schmidt, whoever would like to answer this, but do you guys have an idea of how many people are still collecting unemployment insurance based on like COVID impact or COVID claims? I know there was initially you said 2 million people who had filed unemployment insurance claims, but how many of the current claims right now are due to COVID still?
This is Elise Cafaretta. I was going to kick it to Dave because I don't know if we know why they're filing, but I'll let Dave answer.
So David Schmidt again for the record. We don't have any of the COVID specific programs still in operation. And so we don't have any really natural flags about is it COVID or not, but we do have a very low level of people claiming benefits right now. Currently, just over 50,000 or 15,015 people per week are claiming unemployment benefits. For context, if you look at February, because we had a complete month there, on average in February, it was the lowest number of people filing for unemployment benefits in a February back to 1999, when the state's workforce was a little bit more than half the size that it is now. And so we have really a very low level of unemployment claims overall. And so even if a significant fraction of those were somehow COVID affected claims, it would still be a relatively low number in the scope of unemployment in the program as a whole.
Okay, just to make sure I wrote that down right, you said February 2022 is the lowest number of claims since February of 1999.
Yep, for a February. And we are pushing the lowest like weekly averages that we have seen in that same time frame, but just for details, looking at each February, it was the lowest February since 1999.
Okay, thank you for answering all of my questions. I am going to shoot up north to Senator Settlemyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I was curious, what's the total amount of debt that we currently owe within that trust fund that the businesses are having to try to replenish?
David Schmidt for the record. Currently, we don't have any debt within the Unemployment Trust Fund. We do have the money that we have built up. The question would be, how much money would it take potentially to get up to what we would think of as a solvent trust fund, or being adequately prepared to pay recession level benefits in a future recession? The number for that would be in the ballpark of about $1.5 billion. In contrast, the trust fund, I think currently stands at about 400 million. I don't have the precise number, but that would imply that to get back to be fully prepared for a future recession, there's about $1.1 billion left to go.
So that's fantastic. We don't know the feds or anyone else in any funds, so that's great. I was kind of curious on the number of cases that we went through the pandemic, as far as how much, there was some fraud that occurred, sadly. I was curious how many cases have been put forward for prosecution and how much money has been recovered from those fraudulent claims, or if you had any of that data.
This is Elisa Cafretta, and we have provided those numbers to the Interim Finance Committee recently, so we can share that report with you. What I would say is for investigations, we're working with law enforcement at several levels. So if it's purely a Nevada case, that would be Nevada law enforcement. And as we identify cases, we turn them over to law enforcement. There are also many efforts going on at the federal level, because what we saw was a great deal of sort of organized fraudulent approaches in several states. And we're working with the Office of the Inspector General at the federal level. And as they recover money, that is coming back to us. So we did provide that report. I don't have it in front of me, but we will share it with this committee so you can see those updated numbers.
Thank you, Director Cafferata. And if you would just send that to the committee secretary so she could share it with the entire committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for that information. I was just curious because unfortunately I know several state employees that have now gotten information from the IRS stating that they now owe money back on something they never got, and this is the first time they've run across it, and they're finding it extremely troubling what's going on. So I'd appreciate that information as soon as possible so I can forward it on to my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to go to Assemblymember Kasama next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Cafferata. Thank you to the entire staff and the department as well. I know it's been a really tough few years, and the amount of work that everybody's put in is tremendous, and we appreciate that. And my question falls in line with that. On the agency on the move, there was a section there where you had 268 people coming in and 277 people moving out. So it sounds like you've lost staff. And you have people that have been heroic and working overtime, and everybody's pitched in. What is the, what is the health of your organization as far as proper staffing and unemployment for the unemployment department, and how are you, trying to fill those needs now?
Elisa Cafferata for the record. So I would say Dieter is in the same boat as most state agencies and many employers, which is it's a hard time to find staff. So we're all working diligently to recruit. We have positions open all the time. I think we have about 300 positions open at Dieter. So that's sort of an ongoing effort that we have. I want to make a plug for our business services programs that help other employers and other state agencies. We can go through people who are looking for jobs and match them up and forward their resumes to businesses and government agencies that are looking for folks. So you can check out business services on our online, on our website. Our vocational rehabilitation program also does the same thing. So provides jobs for people with disabilities and matches them to employers. We provide those services to ourselves, but it's an ongoing challenge. I think you're gonna, and when we get to workforce, you'll see some of the barriers and challenges that all employers are facing. One of the things we're doing, which we encourage other employers to consider, is being as flexible as we can. A lot of folks who worked from home and or had flexible schedules during the pandemic really like that. It was made it a lot easier for them to get their work done. So to the extent possible, we're keeping those options in place for our employees, which is very attractive. And what I would say about our numbers is when I started at Dieter, there were about 800 employees, I think, and about 200 of them actually were eligible for retirement. So when I say people stuck with us, a large number of people stuck with us. So that was great to see. It was a great team effort. And what you'll see from us in the interim finance committee coming forward is we have several intermittent positions that were put in place for the pandemic, and we didn't know if we would still need them, and we still do need quite a few of them. So you'll see when we get to June, the number of positions that we would like to keep on a go-forward basis that will still be intermittent, that will be needed to support closing out the backlog and the modernization. So that's what you'll be seeing from us.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Vice Chair next, and then we will go back up north to Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Cavaretta, just a couple of things, and it may have been answered in the last question, but the comeback taking about 5 years, have you all been able to identify any emerging or latent challenges that might be present? And if so, are there things that can be done to mitigate or eliminate them, either from the legislative session coming up next year or maybe in the executive branch? That's just one. Can I have two? Okay.
Elisa Cafaretta for the record. Thank you. Yes, one of the major ones is modernization. So we'll do everything we can to keep that on track because the system itself is a huge part of the work. Several of our other programs are modernizing and updating their case management systems. So agency-wide, we're working to improve access. We do, as part of the budget build, have to submit to the governor's office any bill draft request ideas that we have. So we actually will be having staff meetings internally in the next month or two to identify policy changes. We think it's a little challenging because a lot of the federal programs interacted with the state law. So we're going to really take a deep look at that and see if there are ways to make sure our state policy is set up in the best way we can to interact with federal laws to make it easier to provide services and benefits rather than got extremely complicated there for a while. So we will, if we have recommendations, we will forward that information to you.
Thank you. There was a mention of industries that are growing, and I guess my follow-up question to that would be, do you have any information with any sort of specificity in terms of what industries? Are they tech? Are they medical? And where are they growing in Nevada?
Elisa Cafaretta, I will hope Dave is still on the line. I will start the answer by saying there are several initiatives that different partners in the workforce space take on. So we have identified with GoEd, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, high demand, high growth industries, and that's where a lot of the workforce effort is focused. Dave can hopefully chime in. I can't see whether he's on or not, if he's still on, but he can chime in. We do also have sort of what jobs, what industries, what occupations, and also where they might be. So I'll turn it over to Dave Schmidt.
Thank you, Dave Schmidt, again for the record. There's the 1 hour answer to this question, and there's the 3-minute answer. So I'm going to try to keep it to the 3-minute one, but of course we are happy to provide any data that we have. We love talking about it. In short, in Reno, the unemployment rate in February was, I believe, 2.8%. For context, the unemployment rate in the Reno area has only been below 3% 12 times since 1990. That's the earliest data that we have. So unemployment rate in Reno is really low, and it's really close to its all-time low. In Las Vegas, the unemployment rate is higher. It's a little bit over 5% right now, so just a bit above the statewide average rate. But even that is relatively low and more like a full employment type of economy than the recession level rates that we were seeing even a year ago. As far as which industries, I'm going to look at Las Vegas in particular, since that's the area that has slightly higher unemployment. We still see a number of industries like trade, transportation, utilities, the financial activities industry, professional and technical services, education and health services, healthcare and social assistance, hospitals, food services and drinking places even. All of these industries are more than 100% of their pre-pandemic employment levels. Where we see the biggest gaps and the largest path to recovery, again, the casino hotel industry is only about 80% recovered. So about 20% of those jobs in Las Vegas, about 33,200 jobs total, below where it was at the start of the pandemic. The employment services industry, administrative and temporary services, has been recently down a bit from where it was, I think in part because if you have the option between temporary jobs and permanent jobs, you're probably more likely as a worker to go for the permanent jobs. There's also been some additional disruption in professional and business services. Transportation, like a taxi and limousine service, has struggled for the last several years, and it's continuing to be in that place. Other personal services is down a little bit, in part because in Las Vegas, there's more of these other industries that are still tied to or helping to support the tourism economy and the casino hotel industry, which, because it's disrupted, that kind of spills over into some other industries. But even in Las Vegas, there are a number of other industries that are above or even strongly above where they were at the start of the pandemic. Transportation, warehousing, and utilities is up 13,300 jobs, which is 125% of what it was at the start of the pandemic. So there are still areas that are seeing really significant growth. But Las Vegas, the biggest thing is that because of what's happening in the casino hotel industry and that ongoing disruption of jobs, that is spilling over to some extent to other industries in that area.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to get with you offline to kind of narrow that down with some specificity, but the next question would be, Director Cavaretta, are you all looking at any types of training programs and partnerships for those people who we know in the hotel and service industries that some of the people are being let go because of disruptive technology? And so it's my understanding from one of the labor unions that their average worker is about 47 years old, which presents some challenges. They still want to work, but 47 years old, competing with a 30-year-old, many times they are left behind. So are we looking at any types of partnerships with schools, CSN, NSC, Train Tech, or whatever? Are we looking at anything like that so that we can make sure we jumpstart, in effect, those options and opportunities? Because some of the emerging technologies are going to come within the next 18 months, and so someone who is employed now, that job could be replaced by some type of technology.
Elisa Cafaretta, for the record, yes, you've definitely highlighted one of the challenges with emerging technology, which is these jobs did not exist prior to the current situation that we're in. So we do have a presentation coming up about workforce efforts specifically, but to answer your question, yes, there are many training programs. And what I've heard anecdotally is that there are a lot of folks who came out of the hospitality industry and have gotten training in tech jobs, in coding jobs, because they're sort of very used to dealing with technological systems and providing customer service. In a lot of cases, those folks who worked at the desk or in customer service jobs are well suited. So there is quite a sector of folks who have been able to reskill and go into manufacturing jobs and technology jobs. We will, like I said, talk about many of the specific programs. In the hospitality industry, I would say there's sort of different initiatives because you also passed in the last legislative session the right to return legislation, which meant that people needed to be offered their jobs back if their jobs did come back. So I think that part of the hospitality workforce has been waiting for that to happen. So there are different people with sort of different thoughts about where their future work is going to be. Some folks are more inclined to reskill and start a whole new career, and some want to wait for their job to come back because they really like their job. So we're seeing both things happen. But we do have quite a few training programs, which we will talk about a little bit more later this morning.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We are going to go up north to Assemblymember O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Cafferetta, I really appreciate the work that Dieter's doing in their modernization project particularly. And my question, on your RFP for a new system, Dieter system, are you looking at an off-the-shelf or are you going to a customized system?
Elisa Cafferetta, for the record. I believe the conversation, there are, I have to be careful because we have to follow the state purchasing rules. And so, but I believe basically the way the RFP works is that we have a very extensive list of requirements. There are about a dozen vendors in the space of providing unemployment benefit programs. And so there aren't, to my knowledge, any off-the-shelf programs. They're all some form of a hybrid combination, but some of the criteria that we have in the RFP are that you have built and run a successful unemployment program in another state. So we're not starting with anyone who doesn't have this experience and hasn't been able to solve this problem and have a track record of that. So that answers your question.
So I think that does. Just to clarify, so there will be some customization then of the system is what you think for your unique needs of Nevada.
Elisa Cafferetta, for the record. Yes, the challenge in the unemployment space, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is every state has state law that governs the way the benefits are processed, the criteria for being eligible. And so the federal government is working on some initiatives to develop, so this is the long way around to answer your question. The federal government is working on initiatives to provide all of the states with the tools that we all use. So identity verification is a critical part of the fraud prevention, and we all do it the same. There's only so many ways you can do that. So the federal government is working on some tools that will be accessible to all states. And one of the things that that we have participated in that is going to help all of us is the ability to see in real time if someone has applied for unemployment in another state. That was a very common form of fraud that we should now in the future be able to prevent. So those pieces can sort of ultimately, I think, be sort of universally used from the federal level, but there has to be customization to respond to state law, state requirements, state policy choices that you all make that need to be implemented at the local level. So customization is required.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the time.
Thank you, committee members, for your questions. Okay, so I'm going to go to Senator Lang.
Director, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question about that. And it seems like when we have hearings from the departments, we get a system that works for that time, and then when we need updates. And what really troubles me is that, our system was archaic, and that's why we're getting a new system, but it took all these years. And so I'm wondering what kind of protections or what kind of future thinking the department's doing about the updates that are going to be needed in the future, and is that part of, in your RFP process, is that included in what you're looking for?
Elisa Caffaretta for the record. So when we developed our RFP, we started with sort of our key priorities, and some of the key priorities were, one, it had to be a lot more client-centered. The old systems, you'll find, were designed for staff and serving staff tasks instead of being friendly to the client who is applying for the benefits. But one of the most important priorities for the new system is that it is adaptable into the future. So we tried very hard not to prescribe what the solution would look like. We want vendor expertise for that. What we did say in the RFP was the results that we wanted the technology to deliver. So we want a technology that is scalable on a very short term, which our old system was not. So you could go from record low unemployment benefits to record high unemployment benefits, which Nevada is, that's our history. So we need to be ready for that. Specifically able to implement new programs as Congress makes policy changes, which also happened to us, that the system wasn't particularly adapted to. So, for example, we did not tell the vendor in the RFP that it has to be in the cloud, for example, as a solution. It might be a hybrid of part of the system lives in the cloud and part of it is physical system. Because we want the results, and we want the vendor to bring their expertise and tell us the best way to achieve those results. So we really focused on adaptability, scalability, future-proofing. Another example I would give is there are certain things we can't do now, like use machine learning to make an adjudication. There has to be a human being, but there may be a time when we can incorporate more machine learning into our process. We want the system designed in a way that we can make those changes as the regulations are updated.
Thank you, committee members, for all of your questions. I think that wraps up this agenda item. And don't go too far, Director. I believe we have you here for our next agenda item 5, which is a presentation on current issues.
Thank you. Elisa Caffaretta, Director of DETR, joined by my team members. This started as a longer list. Hopefully you have the right presentation of current issues.
We do. And members, I've just checked the legislative subcommittee's website. If you'd like to follow along on the PowerPoint on the website or on the screen, it looks, again, it's more accurate. Thank you.
Apologies for that. So we had several sort of current questions that we were asked to give you an update on. So you'll see some of those answers here, and we're happy, of course, to answer any other questions. So the first specific question we got was if you refuse to get the COVID vaccine, next slide on the slides, and you were dismissed or quit, would you be eligible for unemployment benefits? And if you have been paying attention to any unemployment presentations, you'll know the answer is a very large "it depends" on all the different criteria. So first of all, just at the high level, a reminder that unemployment benefits are a partial wage replacement that is temporary to help you get back to a job. So to qualify for unemployment benefits, you must meet all of the criteria that are in place at the time, and they changed quite a bit during COVID, but we are back to sort of the very narrow set of criteria you must meet. So this flow chart comes from the guidance that we share with our adjudicators. And again, you have to meet all of the criteria to be eligible. So there aren't any very definitive yes or no's here. So I'll just walk you through kind of these are the things that an adjudicator would ask in a review of a case. And I would say I'm not an adjudicator, but I can play one on TV. So let's, and if you have more questions than what's here, I'll have to phone in a friend. But basically, one of the first questions we would ask is, did you know that there was a vaccine mandate before you took the job? Because that would create an expectation. So if you knew there was a mandate and you took the job and then you refused to get a vaccine, it's likely your claim would be denied unless there are some other circumstances. If you didn't know about the mandate before you got there, then the next question we would ask is, okay, you found out about the mandate. Did you have a medical reason or a religious reason not to get the vaccine? If you do have a medical reason, then the next question we ask is it documented? Do you have a note from your doctor for why you cannot get the vaccine? And if you do have a medical documentation of why you shouldn't get a vaccine, even though your employer has a mandate, then you are more likely to be approved for unemployment, again, as long as you meet all of the other criteria to get unemployment benefits. If you don't have documentation, then the claim would likely be denied in most cases. If you don't have documentation and you quit or were discharged for failure to vaccinate, again, it's not cut and dried. If there were if you quit for good cause, and there are several criteria that determine what good cause would be, your benefits would potentially be approved, again, as long as you meet all of the other criteria. If you refused and you don't have a medical or a religious reason to refuse, then your claim is likely to be denied. So that's sort of walking you through sort of the series of questions. Like I said, if we have more questions about that, I will have to call in somebody specifically who can answer all of those. The next sort of current event that we talk about is the backlog. I wanted to share this information because the constituents you are likely hearing from now are those who are in adjudication, and unfortunately, because of the millions of claims we got, we are still adjudicating claims. And again, we're through the backlog in the pandemic unemployment assistance. That's cleared up. But in regular unemployment, these are the ones where we have the due process requirement. They're much more complicated claims. We need to hear from both the employer and the employee, and these interviews take quite a while. So we are several months behind, unfortunately, and you will be hearing from those folks. So I would say, so how can you help them? Well, more than 50% of our claims are paid within 14 days after the first week of unemployment is filed. That's sort of the benchmark we're going for, so we're halfway there. And the the best way to get in that line is to not have issues that need to be adjudicated. So there's some specific issues that I've listed here, and I will go through them and tell you how people can avoid ending up in adjudication. So if people got a severance package or vacation pay, those weeks, they're still counted as getting paid. So if they want to avoid going into adjudication, they can sort of wait out those weeks. So if you got 2 weeks of vacation, you can just hang out for those 2 weeks, take your vacation pay, and then when you file for unemployment, you don't have to list that pay because you were paid for those weeks, and you just start filing for unemployment. So then there's nothing to adjudicate. But once you list those weeks, then we have to determine, because in unemployment rules, you're still getting paid. So that's one thing, is just for however many weeks you got paid, wait, and then apply for unemployment. The second thing that we're seeing is for a certain percentage of folks, we call them up if they're unemployed and offer them an appointment to come in and go through reemployment services. So this is an assessment of their skills, discussion of what jobs they're interested in, conversation, as Senator Sherman is talking about, of training that is available to them. And they need to come in and go through that process in order to remain eligible for benefits. So if they are contacted, they need to respond and participate in the program to maintain their eligibility. This is kind of ties in with under unemployment. You have to continue to get benefits, you have to be able and available to work and looking for work. That was sort of suspended during the pandemic because we were asking people not to do that, but those rules are back in place. So if you are not able and available to work or not looking, then you can just not file that week, and then there's nothing to adjudicate. So only file in the weeks where you're able and available to work and looking for work. And unreported earnings is something we're seeing a great deal of. People are working sort of part-time, but they're still applying for unemployment. That's fine as long as you always report your wages. Your benefits will be reduced, but that's all fine. We want people on the journey to go back to work, but they have to sort of follow all the rules and tell us what's going on. So if they have earnings, they need to report them in the week that they're earned. And if people have questions about that, they can always call our call centers. The lines are down, and we're able to get to the vast majority of folks who call in. So it's important that folks follow those rules so that they can avoid going to adjudication, which does have a backlog. And then just to sort of come back to, we talked about this a little in the last presentation, but one of the reasons we have this backlog is we've lost a lot of the assistance and the extra help that we had during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, we were able to use non-merit staff, which meant we could hire contract staffing services to assist. Those contracts have, the funding has ended. The ability to use those folks has gone away. That was actually rescinded in September of 2021. As you recall, we had 200 welfare staff folks who were working evenings and weekends in overtime to assist us. They're back to welfare to work on their work there, so we don't have that help anymore. Like I said, these numbers, I'm not sure where I got them, but they weren't accurate. We had 183 intermittent employment security staff and 16 IT intermittent staff. And we will have a request to keep 63 of the ESD staff and 16 of the IT staff going forward, like I said, for the modernization effort. So you'll see that at the Interim Finance Committee. So that really has been what has kept us from finally clearing out all of the backlog. We're on track to get done this year. It's certainly disappointing we can't go faster. We are constantly we have a weekly meeting on what else can we try, what other ways can we get through this backlog. So we're completely dedicated to doing it as fast as we can. And unfortunately, It's not going as fast as we would like, and you probably are hearing about it, but I just wanted to reassure you that we are doing everything we can to approach this and get through the backlog so people can get their benefits in a timely way.
Okay, members, any questions for Director Cafaretta? I'm going to start with Senator Lang.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions. The first one is about the backlog, which I'm sure you knew was going to come up. So I am getting lots of emails from my constituents, and even people that aren't my constituents. So I think they're emailing all the elected officials, and then we're all emailing you. But my question is, these are people that can't pay their rent, can't buy food, can't pay their electricity, and some of the people that have emailed me have been waiting for over 9 months. And when I refer them, I'm told that the wait is, the backlog is still very large. And I really have a heart for these people because, you know, when you have all those insecurities, it is very difficult to manage in life. And, you know, and that brings in the mental illness that people are having because of all of this. So I understand that the department has lost a lot of people, that we aren't staffed at the levels we were during the pandemic. But how can we get to whole again sooner? I mean, I think we all want it to happen sooner, and it's not something I am blaming the department. I think it is, this has happened because we had so many claims. But how can we get to whole again so that we can help Nevadans get their feet back on the ground and feel like they can provide for themselves or their families or their children? I mean, you know, we all saw the article about the teacher that's living in her car because she can't afford, you know, to pay rent. This is happening a lot. And these people that are in the backlog have nothing. They're not getting any assistance anymore. There's none out there. So how can we help get them to whole again sooner?
Elisa Cafaretta, for the record. I wish I had a better answer for you. I have to say, in the whole duration of my time with Dieter, which is now going on 1.5 years, I think this is probably the most frustrated I've been, because in the height of the pandemic, there were lots of moving parts, and every week we were reinventing the process. We were redeploying staff. Every time we finished one backlog of work, we redeployed those staff and put them somewhere else. But one of the reasons we shared the staffing with you is, you know, we're down probably 500 staff because of the change in the rules at the federal level and the funding that we have, and the welfare folks having to go back and start working on the backlog that they have in welfare. So we have been working with our federal delegation. We would love it if you would add your voices to this. The loss of staffing flexibility, the loss of the ability to bring in contract staff, many of whom, so we were working with Maximus and we're also working with Nelnet. Some of those Maximus folks had 1 year plus of experience of unemployment claims processing. So they actually, and we would very targeted in our approach with them, we'd have them work on one specific issue. So we'd train them in depth in that issue. But they now, those folks we are losing because we can't use them under federal rules, they had 1 year plus of experience of processing unemployment claims. Whereas the folks that we can hire, they're brand new and we have to train them. And it's, as you saw from the one flow chart of the one question, it's a very complex system. So if the DOL would just let us have the staffing flexibility to get through the backlog, not on a go-forward basis, just to get back through the backlog, that would be significant. The way our cases are funded, the way we're funded, we get funding for we get base year funding, which is sort of the average year, which there's not really such a thing. And then sort of after the fact, we get above base for the number of cases that have come in. Well, all these programs have expired, so no new cases are coming in. So there's also no additional above base money to administer the program, even though we still have these cases. And we do have, I don't think it's 9 months, but it's close, several months of backlog to get through. And the frustration is, I know people need the money right now, but we have to go in order of the people that need the money and get to the folks who have been waiting 8 months as soon as we can. And there's just no good answers on that. Again, we are coming to you. We're going to ask to keep as many intermittent staff as we can. What we might do is go back and look at maybe we should ask to keep more to focus on this backlog. So that is one potential thing we could do. But we are running out of the legal authority and the money and the people with expertise to do this work. And like I said, this is the most frustrated I've ever been, because the need is, if you lost your job, the need is just as great now as it was during the pandemic. I will say there are other assistance programs. You mentioned rental assistance. I do believe there is still assistance in housing. We can make sure you have those resources, but there is very little that's available. So I'll go back to my team and see if there's anything else we can ask you for.
Thank you, Director. I just want to follow up on the question Senator Ling asked. Now, that guidance, how long did you have? Was that guidance that came down from the Department of Labor where they allowed you guys to use like merit staff, or was it guidance and then they rolled it back in September of 2021? And would it just take guidance from the Department of Labor again to allow you guys to use this staff to clear up the backlog?
Elisa Cafretta for the record. Yes, we get policy letters, which are directives. It's not really guidance, it's direction from the Department of Labor. And at the beginning of the pandemic, they gave us flexibility. So merit staff are state employees, essentially, and they gave us flexibility to not have to have merit staff doing the work. And then at September of 2021, that flexibility was ended, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And what happens when the Department of Labor gives you this direction is they also do several webinars with our state employees, and they came back to this point again and again and again that the flexibility had ended and we could not operate the way we were operating before.
I'm going to go to Assemblyman O'Neill in Carson City.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Caffaretta, going to the vaccine refusal issue, a couple quick questions. Do you have any numbers on how many you received for claims in the employee that was discharged had a medical or religious note or was making that religious medical exemption?
Elisa Cafretta for the record. I do not believe we have a way to capture that information. It's not part of the application. I'll check with my team to see if we have numbers on that.
Well, I thought it would be part if you're asking why were they discharged, or what was the reasoning? And then, because my follow-up would be how many of those were accepted versus denied? And how did you make that determination to accept or deny those claims?
Elisa Cafretta for the record. So if you, so sort of the big picture response would be if the reason that you quit your job or were let go was because you refused to get a mandated vaccine, that's not that you can apply for unemployment. Then the question is, do you qualify? And so I don't believe there's anything on our application that would, the question would be, did you quit or were you laid off? And you would explain that. And then the reason you would go into adjudication is if the employer said, you quit, but it wasn't for a good reason, so I protest you getting unemployment. So that would be when the case would come to adjudication.
Well, in your slide here, you have right here that, no, does employee have medical advice not to vax? And that's what I'm curious about. And then you also talk about religious. So you must be asking someplace what was their reasoning for dismissal. And if they state, well, I have a medical or religious exemption, that's got to be determined someplace, and to me would be a statistic that would be of value.
Elisa Cafretta for the record. So we would definitely have those notes in our case notes of the adjudication. I just don't know how easy it would be to pull out the statistic. I will check with my team and see if there's a way we can sort of get you some numbers on that.
Well, and actually the one that I'm really looking for is the justification on how many you accepted, denied, and why did you accept or denied? Why was one doctor better than the others? You accepted that doctor but not another medical doctor, and then also on religion, how you separated them out. That's really what I'm looking for, is how you made those determinations.
This is Elisa Cafretta again. I believe that we have dozens of adjudicators, and so the goal of our work and the goal of this kind of guidance is to create a fair system. And so I don't believe we would evaluate, if you had a doctor's note, I don't believe we would evaluate whether the doctor was good or not. It's documentation from a medical professional that likely if you met the other criteria, then you would be eligible for the benefits. I believe for religious reasons, we take that on faith, if you will. There's not a way to document that. I believe our attorney is on the line. Maybe he could talk through sort of the process of sort of how these decisions are made. That might provide
help,
some.
What I want to make sure is you're saying you
reassurance.
have dozens of adjudicators, that they all adjudicated to the same standard. There must have been a policy or determination, some kind of definition on what to or not to accept. So yes, maybe your attorney can assist on that one. Thank you.
We can go to your attorney, Director Cafretta. Is he or she available?
Troy? He said he was going to be, I can't tell down here whether he's online or not. Is Troy online?
Well, Chair, if the attorney's not available, maybe they can get us the information on that policy, on how they determined on what to accept or not.
It looks like we do have them on, Assemblyman O'Neill, so we will go ahead and turn to, and it's Mr.
Troy
Jordan for the record.
Mr. Jordan.
Senior Legal Counsel for the Employment Security Division. In truth, Assemblyman O'Neill, I will start out with saying that it's a fluctuating situation on a number of levels, but the guidance from the Department of Labor and the guidance with what little court we have are that it will depend on a case-by-case basis in large part. What I can tell you with some certainty is if they have a genuinely held religious belief exemption, they will likely get paid. If they have a doctor saying they should not vax, the likelihood is they will get paid. That is the guidance we've set out, as long as they've got the documentation, obviously. The other thing I want to clear up is that adjudicators work in such a way that they interview both the parties. For example, if the employer is contesting this, they interview the employer and get their documentation. They interview the claimant and get their documentation. If the losing party does not like the adjudicator's decision, they then go do a full-on evidentiary hearing where this claimant can call witnesses. For example, they could call their pastor or priest or whatever the title of the religious person may be. Or they can bring in their doctor or documents from their doctor. NRS 612-500 allows them to use statements from witnesses because the hearings are designed to bring in all the evidence and not necessarily follow court evidentiary rules as we would normally understand them. With that said, we have tried to mirror the Department of Labor with our guidance to our adjudicators and referees saying, you have to look at every case separately. I don't want to necessarily get into hypotheticals. I will also try to ease your mind, Assemblyman, that I have currently, in 2021, we had 700 petition for judicial review cases. Plus, it's a little over 700. I don't remember the total number off the top of my head at this point. And we are breaking record levels in 2022, as you might expect, just getting through the pandemic cases and the cases as they come in. And I can tell you not one of these cases has gone to a petition yet. I don't know what the reason for that is yet, or if it's just that most of them have either gotten paid or the employers aren't contesting it. I don't want to speculate because we don't have that data. With regard to other considerations, DOL guidance tends to change over time. And the other two issues that I want to make clear for the record is the two separations that would cause a case to go forward are either you quit without good cause or that you violated a reasonable standard of your employer. And that's what we call under unemployment law misconduct. The question that is going to be in flux is what was a reasonable standard? And I will give you two examples anecdotally. For example, if an employer were to fire someone who was already working at home in the privacy of their home behind a computer for not taking a vaccine, there is at least a solid legal argument that it is not a reasonable standard to force them to vaccinate if they are already separated from the public, whereas someone who is interacting with the public every day, such as in a hospital or other medical setting, that may weigh in favor of it being upheld. I don't want to comment on either of those scenarios more than I just did, because as I said, case law is in flux. These cases are working themselves through the court system, but the guidance we are giving in general is look at every case at an individual basis, weigh the results as you would, and that if they are documented, most likely they will be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Assemblyman O'Neill, any follow-up?
Chair, I could follow this up for hours, I think. I'm still looking for what the policy is on these employees. So
why don't we
will
have
just
you
say
connect?
thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come down to Assemblymember Kasama next.
Thank you, Chair and Director Cafaretta. My question is, where you said the Department of Labor has taken away the flexibility for hiring staff, would you be able to email our committee with the section from the Department of Labor where those regulations are? Because we all sitting here want to help the people of the state of Nevada. And if there's any way that we could work with our congressional delegation, I am an optimist the state moves slow and I think Congress moves even slower, but I'd like that opportunity for us, all of us here, to try and pursue that, to see if there's something we can do to help you get the workforce that you need that is already trained, that's sitting out there, as you said. Thank you.
Lisa Cafaretta, yes, we will provide that to you.
Okay, thank you. And I am going to go back up north to Senator Settlemyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question is asking Ms. Cafaretta to reach out to the HR departments in the state of Nevada. And unfortunately, I do know several individuals that have been no longer employed with the state of Nevada due to the fact that their medical exemption or their religious exemption has been denied. If you could just reach out to the HR departments for the state and maybe get me that data, how many have been requested and how many have been denied. Sadly, they're not, well, the good news is they're not unemployed. They've just went and worked for the private sector. I know an individual who was not allowed medical exemption. They automatically went to work for Tesla for 3 times the pay, so good for them. But bad for the state of Nevada, because the state of Nevada had put tens of thousands of dollars into training of this individual. To have them leave because of this, I guess, mandate. But in that respect, I'm curious if we could just try to get some anecdotal information about how widespread of a problem this is. So if you could just reach out to the HR departments and try to find that information for me, I'd appreciate it. I know it's unfair to ask you to do it, but I'm not sure who best to try to reach out to the HR departments of the different entities of the state of Nevada. And that's why I'm asking you to do it, or if you could direct me to the right person, I'll put that question appropriately in front of them. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Settlemeyer. Okay, members, Senator Lang, round 2.
Thank you, Chair Howdicke. We've had some conversation about.
Senator Settlemeyer, your microphone's still on. Could you please mute
Sorry
it?
about that.
We've had conversation about the flexibility of the staffing, and I think you mentioned in your comments that it would be helpful if we, as a committee, could send a letter to our federal delegation and or the Department of Labor, or there may be other people. And so, Chair Howdicke, I'm wondering what the process might be for us as a group to say that would be a great idea and proceed.
I completely agree, and I've already pinged my policy analyst for help with that. Okay, members, seeing no other questions, we can move on to our next agenda item with Director Cafaretta. Agenda item number 6, which is a presentation on ongoing workforce efforts by Dieter. Thank you, Director.
Good morning. Thank you. Still Elisa Cafaretta. So I'm going to give you a super high level. I know you're hearing from other folks this morning on workforce efforts. I'm just going to give you the highlights of sort of what we did during COVID, what's sort of currently happening, and a little look into the future. Let me just say this about workforce, which is the part of my job I'm really excited to be spending a lot of time digging into, is there is a very large and complex sort of workforce development ecosystem in the state. And I did not sort of try and draw a map. I've actually been asking for a map of the workforce ecosystem, and there's not really a great map of all the people who are working on helping develop our workforce that we need. So I'll share with you sort of my thinking about it, and hopefully this will help you as you're thinking about policies that we might propose together in the next legislative session. So the way I'm thinking about where we need to go, because you will very rapidly get into very complicated weeds about all the places where this happens, who pays for it, how it's funded, how it's directed, what the guidance is. I learned just this weekend that the Department of Agriculture has workforce development staff who are in their sort of literacy arm of the Department of Ag. The state treasurer has a navigator who does career navigation for folks who are getting Millennium scholarships. I mean, it really exists everywhere. So as you're thinking about it, the way I'm thinking about it is you know pretty well what the old workforce ecosystem in Nevada was good at doing, which was helping to make sure there were plenty of workers for the hospitality industry, gaming and tourism, because that really was the backbone of the state. And what I'm thinking about is what changes do we need to make in the workforce ecosystem to make sure that it can do that, but also prepare people for these emerging technologies and the jobs of the future. And there's no one entity that owns all of sort of the direction of workforce development. And I think a lot of the challenges that we see are from approaches that are sort of top down. We're going to have one plan for the state, and that's how we're doing workforce development. The system is so complex, I don't think we will be successful if that is our approach. So the way I'm thinking about it is, what 2 or 3 initiatives, what specific projects can we work on together? What specific policies can we change that will really leverage the results that we are looking for? So that's my 30,000-foot view of what we're doing. I want to tell you a little bit of the specifics of what Dieter is doing. And like I say, you're hearing from other folks in the ecosystem later on today, so you'll get a good picture of some of the things that are happening. So if you look at what we did during COVID, while we borrowed a lot of staff from our workforce programs to help process unemployment claims, we also at the same time made a lot of effort to make sure our services were available online. So we were one of the first state in the country to make vocational rehabilitation applications fully available online, and those vocational rehabilitation support services available through online appointments. We also offered virtual services because our Job Connects all closed down, but we offered virtual services. We had quite a few very successful virtual job fairs. Those are still available, but we are also moving to in-person job fairs. Our partners that do a lot of the workforce development work, Nevada Works in the north and Workforce Connections in the south, stayed up and online, and they also made their services available virtually or in some cases in person. The day labor offices reopening actually should be on current efforts. They closed during the pandemic based on the state precautions. We applied for and received several emergency grants to provide additional services to displaced workers. The Sandy grant is focused on providing new training and apprenticeship programs for people who are most heavily impacted by the pandemic, and the Anna grant is designed to create new registered apprenticeship programs and enlist underserved populations who you don't typically see in apprenticeships as we go forward. We were really excited to work with the governor on Job Fest, which had hundreds and hundreds of employers, interviews on the spot. Over 100 people got jobs that day, and many more had interviews and followed up. So that's the sort of effort that we had during the pandemic to keep that work going as folks were pivoting back to going back to work. All of our Job Connects are now back open. Vocational rehabilitation is able to do in-person services. The Apprenticeship Council has been reevaluating and approving non-construction apprenticeships, which is sort of the direction that we are looking to go in the future. Those approvals are now live back at Business and Industry, so you may hear from them this afternoon. That part of the workforce process went back to Business and Industry in the last legislative session. It's under the Labor Commissioner and the State Apprenticeship Council. We have the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. They have reinvigorated the Governor's Workforce Development Board, which sort of works to develop the state plan for workforce investment activities and make sure that those are the plans from all the partners are integrated. The industry sector councils, which give us information from employers in specific industry areas, have also been reinvigorated. So we've got folks from healthcare, manufacturing, IT, and logistics really telling us from an employer perspective what skills they're looking for, the challenges they have in hiring people, what training they would like to see developed. The Governors Association did a workforce innovation analysis. They did a report of our ecosystem, and there are several recommendations that we're implementing from that report. And there are a lot of other efforts that are ongoing currently to make sure people can get the training and supports that they need. So just looking into the future, one of the recommendations from the Governor's Association report was to elevate these priorities for the governor. So we're creating a sub-cabinet that is going to focus on the governor's workforce priorities. You heard several of them in the State of the State address. And certainly jobs in the economy have been a priority, obviously all through the pandemic, but especially now. So the members of the sub-cabinet will be Dieter, GoEd, the Department of Education, the System of Higher Education, the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, and the Veterans Administration. And our focus really is, and here's where we come back to the philosophy, which is what are the sort of specific initiatives we can take to leverage all of the resources in the ecosystem to get people where they need to go. So we're looking at more free training that can be supported in the system that's in addition to what's already available. The AB 450 committee, which was a bill that you passed in the last legislative session, is looking at what can we do to make community college and particularly the workforce tracks there more accessible. And the Labor Commissioner, again, is working on more availability of apprenticeships. One of the major initiatives is to get better data in the Empower system, which is the longitudinal data system which tracks when we make an investment in workforce or education, what are the outcomes for employment and wages on the as people get through those trainings. So where can we invest in the workforce for the highest return on investment? And one of the other major initiatives that you'll probably be hearing about and may see legislation on is sort of coming up with a shared definition of what is a quality credential and how we can make it more accessible. There's been nationally, it's not just in Nevada, just a huge explosion of the number of certificates and credentials that are available. And we are working on how can we make sure people can find those credentials. A lot of them, the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act will pay for you to get those trainings and get those credentials. We want to make sure people can find them if they're interested, can sort of have an understanding of how valuable they are. Do employers value this? Do you get good wages when you complete these credentials? And how can you get support to get that training? I think you'll also see some industry-specific rapid response. The governor mentioned healthcare. The Department of Education is working on teachers, which is a critical pipeline we need to support. Childcare certainly is critical. There are opportunities in the lithium industry, and certainly climate change is another priority that we're looking to address. Vocational rehabilitation, we want to integrate their work more with the workforce ecosystem sort of writ large, and occupational licensing reform has a role to play in getting people into the jobs that they want. I would say sort of parallel and integrated with this work is the major barriers that we are seeing in Nevada, and I know you're going to hear more about this. For young women, childcare is absolutely a full stop barrier. If you don't have childcare, then you're sort of stuck. So I know the governor has major investment and initiatives in this area, and we are in a support role of how we can help them develop the staffing they need and get any policy changes they need. But there are other folks taking the lead on childcare. Affordable housing is critical, and transportation is critical. So you'll probably be hearing from folks working in those spaces. But those are some of the major barriers to getting folks back to work that have dropped out of the workforce during the pandemic. So those are some of the major initiatives that we are working on. And as we get closer, we'll probably have some policy recommendations we'd love to work with you on.
Thank you so much, Director. I am going to check down here first to see if we have any questions with our Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a quick question, and you covered it just about thoroughly for me. You mentioned you're checking to make sure that if there are any licensing or professional agencies. So are you working with the professional licensing boards, especially when it comes to, we passed a number of bills last time with respect to compact. There are people who may want to go into nursing. There are people who may want to go into the beauty industry, cosmetology or barber or something else. Are you working with them to see how they might be able to help identify people, and then once identified, to make sure that the licensing process is expedited, particularly working with the Veterans Services Committee? So that's just one way I'm thinking that we might be able to get people jobs. And if so, is there some place on your website where someone can go, click a button, and find all of these resources, as opposed to visiting 7 different websites and trying to figure it out?
Lisa Cafferetta for the record. So I would share with you a couple of things. One is occupational licensing reform is one of the governor's priority initiatives. So we're working with the governor's office to support them. And I don't have all the details of the conversations that they're having, but we're very supportive. We will share with you, the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation did an analysis of occupational licensing and reform, primarily with an eye to supporting the Veterans Administration. And we really especially see spouses of active military as well as veterans who have moved a lot, and these are people who have great skills, licensed in several other states, facing challenges here to get licensing. So I believe Nevada participates in a few of the compacts, but there are, I think, I'm going to guess a number, 7 compacts, and I don't think we're participating in all of them. So there's certainly opportunity there. But we can share this report with you, which gives you a pretty in-depth look at sort of the opportunities and challenges and ways other states have addressed it, because for certain, for veterans and people coming from other states, there are challenges and we can do a better job. So we'll share that with you.
Thank you. Follow-up. So last session, there was a bill that came out of the Sunset Subcommittee recommending some changes with respect to how licensing boards, because we've been dealing with this since 1999. The reports that they're supposed to push forward to the legislature, and then they don't. And those reports include how many people have applied, how many people were denied, why, that sort of thing. And then the big clincher for that is for veterans and military spouses. So as you go forward and look at this, if that's something that you could include in the information you might request, that could probably help us, because right now we don't really have a clue from some of the boards. They have never answered that questions or those questions, and so that exacerbates the problem. And coming out of COVID, I think that it is more imperative that everyone involved in workforce, whatever category that is, everyone involved has got to push to make sure that the professional boards do what they're supposed to do by statute.
Okay, thank you. Members down south, I'm going to do a check down here for questions, and let me go check to see. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions up north. So thank you so much, Director, for your presentation, for being here for all 3. We appreciate you and your staff and all the work you've done. And I know you had mentioned that many of your staff have worked through the pandemic without a day off. I hope they are getting some rest now. Thank you. And please let them know that we appreciate all their hard work. Thank you. Okay, members, moving along to our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 7, presentation on small businesses in Nevada and current workforce needs. It was always my intention when we started the interim subcommittee to make this an informational interim committee where we are learning about all of the industries and areas that come before commerce and labor, and making sure that we are fair and hearing from everyone impacted in every sector. So we heard from our public sector when it comes to labor. I think it's important that we also hear from the private sector to hear the issues that our small businesses are facing as well. Again, this is agenda item number 7, and we are going to start down here in Southern Nevada with agenda item number 7A, which is a presentation from the Vegas Chamber. We have President Mary Beth Seawold here, who is the Chief Executive Officer, to present. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Ms. Sewell, will you make sure your microphone is on? Thank you.
Sorry about that. Good morning again. Let's try take two. Thank you so much, Chair Hottegui, Vice Chair Spearman, and members of the Joint Committee. For the record, my name is Mary Beth Seawald. I'm the President and CEO of the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, also known as the Vegas Chamber. I'm joined today with my colleague, Dylan Keith. He is the Manager of Government Affairs at the Vegas Chamber as well. Once again, I want to thank you all for having us today. What I'm going to do is give you a very brief, high-level overview of the Vegas Chamber, just a little bit of its history, some of the services that the Vegas Chamber provides, which is in direct response to the needs of the business community, employers, employees. And I want to stress that this is not just members that we provide these benefits to, these resources. These are members and non-members alike. As a matter of fact, throughout the height of the pandemic, the Vegas Chamber made a concerted effort, and we gave away more than 350 free memberships to our smallest businesses. And we define as small businesses as those with fewer, this is in NRS as well, fewer than 50 or fewer employees. And so we find it incredibly important to provide these resources to employers and employees across the entire state, north, south, rurals. And I know that you'll hear stories from my colleague Ann Silver in Northern Nevada as well. One of the things that drives us at the Vegas Chamber, and I really was interested to hear from Director Cafferata, because prior to her arrival at Dieter, we literally took calls from those who were unemployed, who could not get resources from Dieter. They were literally suicidal. And so at the Vegas Chamber, we were sort of boots on the ground. We were the front line in a lot of ways, but we didn't have a lot of the resources or education to be able to help these folks. And so we partnered with our strategic partners like Workforce Connections to provide those kinds of resources. But one story I'll tell you just quickly is we have a member who, her name is Kathy Brooks from the Hydrant Club. She's a small business owner in Southern Nevada, dog training, dog daycare and things like that. She called me one night during the height of the pandemic in tears, said, I cannot do this. I cannot keep my business open. So the very next day we had, luckily, the Vegas Chamber had a webinar with Joe Amato from the Small Business Administration. We were able to actually connect her directly with Joe. He walked her through how to fill out a PPP loan, EIDL loans, and things like that. And we did that. That's just one example of hundreds that I'm sure all of my chamber colleagues from across the state could share with you of real person-to-person assistance that we were able to provide. And again, that just was something that fueled the entire team. And I think our teams at the chambers across the street were able to, across the state, were able to step up in ways that we really didn't even know we could. But while this was the most challenging time I think we've ever faced, it was also the most gratifying. So with that, just to give you a tiny bit of background about the Vegas Chamber, we're celebrating 111 years this year being in business, the broadest business organization across the state. We have a lot of resources. We're the only chamber, we're the first chamber in the U.S. to house the Employee Envy Business Hub, and that was something that was a direct result of what members and non-members alike had told us that they needed across the state. So we have our handprints all over a lot of things across the state, including things like the airport, what is now the Harry Reid International Airport, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, also the designation of Interstate 11. So the Chamber has a long history of being very involved in this community, and that was no small change here during the height of the pandemic. The Vegas Chamber is also the first in the nation to provide a comprehensive association health plan. Again, not the only ones to do that. Thankfully, our friends in Northern Nevada and Reno, Sparks, do that as well. We also have an association retirement plan. These are things that our members and non-members alike can have access to. And the reason this is so important, as you all know, is because our employers need to have important benefits to provide employees. So many associations and organizations in the country do not have the ability, companies do not have the ability to provide affordable health plans or retirement plans, and our employees deserve benefits like that. And so these are things that the Vegas Chamber has really gone above and beyond to really make sure that our employers have those benefits. We're engaged in workforce development efforts, and what's really important there is that we're engaged in upskilling and reskilling our employees so that they can be connected to those important positions. How do we do that? Through our partnership at the Employee NV Business Hub with Workforce Connections. So these are just a few of the things. Of course, we provide resources, HR, OSHA, labor guidance, and advertising and things like that that businesses need as well. So some of the challenges, that's what you're really here to hear. What are the challenges that our businesses are saying that they're talking about? Of course, everybody's talking about inflation. The global condition right now, I think, has a lot of people really nervous. These are just the larger I think, global things that people are really talking about. But when you bring it back home, they're really looking at our quality education system. Education is huge. Affordable housing came up yesterday about 15 times. And I think that's another thing where people, even if we're able to upskill and reskill and get our employees the jobs that they need to take care of their families, they're still now in a position where they can't even afford housing. So this is something that the Vegas Chamber is working on as well. That's a bit of a newer initiative. And then, of course, providing those educational resources. Opportunities for targeted industry growth. One of the things that we recently partnered with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, the Vegas Chamber was instrumental in putting together the brand new Workforce Blueprint 3.0, which is actually not even out yet, but we can get you all a copy of that. That discusses general and advanced manufacturing, business and financial services, the top really emerging industries that we're seeing here in Southern Nevada. And it's important that we understand what those are so that the chambers can work with our educational systems to, again, get those certificates that Director Cafferata talked about, so that the business community is really leading the way on having our companies throughout the state of Nevada identify what are their needs, and then we connect with our educational systems. Then we can provide our workforce with the skills and the talents and the resources that they need in order to be able to be skilled and a ready workforce for these new and emerging industries that are outlined mainly in the Workforce Blueprint 3.0. Another thing that I'm extremely proud of at the Vegas Chamber is that we have been working with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, the LVGVA, the LVCVA, to submit multiple unique regional proposals. This is in response to the $3 billion Investing in America's Communities initiative. The Vegas Chamber has been spearheading and convening organizations on the Good Jobs Challenge. That is a grant that could potentially garner up to $27 million for Southern Nevada. But the best news about this is that we're not going to be dependent on a grant. Whether we get this grant or not, we are working with our strategic partners and educational systems to stand up these programs and resources regardless of any grants whatsoever. So if we do get the grants, of course, that will be, it'll be the largest ever regional collaboration to apply for these federal funds. But the good news is, again, that we're able to provide these resources and this framework regardless of whether we get these grants. And of course, the Investing in America's Communities offers funding opportunities in three main areas, and those are employment, economic revitalization, and then, of course, to help our hardest hit industries, which Director Cafferata also discussed, being the hospitality industry. Restaurants, of course, have been among the hardest hit. Again, the Good Jobs Challenge, really excited about this. This builds on that 2021 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or the CEDS. We're leading the efforts to secure the EDA funding for that Good Jobs Challenge. And the goal really is to just get people back to work by strengthening that workforce and that talent pipeline. One of the big things that we're also working on, and we've talked about childcare here today, this is, as we have polled our members and non-members alike across the state, they are telling us that, of course, workforce is their number one priority, but one of the biggest barriers to those workers going back to their jobs is childcare. And so over the last 3 months, the Vegas Chamber partnered with Clark County. We've put together a program, again, where we're giving away 357 free chamber memberships to child care entities to give them the resources that they need to be able to stay in business so that our workforce has a good quality, trusted place to take their children. And so we're really excited about that. We've already signed up 52 members, child care members across the state. So this is something we're really excited about. They're very happy to have these resources. They would never be able to have these resources were it not for this program that the Chamber has been able to put together through our friends, Marilyn Kirkpatrick, mainly Commissioner Kirkpatrick at the Clark County. So these are just a few of the things. And again, these are all in response to what our members call us and say, hey, these are the things that we need. Workforce continues to drive our efforts right now. That's our primary point of focus at the Vegas Chamber. And so in the interest of time and out of respect for your time, I'll keep my remarks very brief and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sewell. I want to start by saying thank you. I actually attended 2 of the virtual meetings with Joe Amato, just so that I could gather resources to then share with my district. And those were some of the most helpful informational Zoom meetings I was on during the height of the pandemic, making sure we were distributing the information via newsletter to small businesses and constituents in my district who maybe didn't own a small business in my district, but were constituents in my district and maybe owned small businesses elsewhere. But I am going to start by turning it over to the members to see if they have any questions. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. How are you doing this morning?
Excellent. Thank you, ma'am.
Good. So just a real quick question, because this has come up from to me in the form of email from several of my constituents. We talk about child care, but the other piece of that is at the other end of life spectrum, elder care. Some people are caring for a parent or grandparent or someone in their family, and they can't go back to work because they don't have enough for full-time nursing care. So are we addressing that in any way? We've got child care. What about elder care?
Yes, we're sort of calling that the sandwich generation, where they're not only having to find, if they're not able to work remotely, they're having to find child care and elder care. So the elder care piece of that is something that is next on the agenda. We've mainly been focusing on child care because that's what the businesses, employers said they needed the most. We're not hearing quite as much about elder care, but as we progress through this program with Clark County, elder care is next on the list, but it's not something that we've actually put together a program per se as yet. Great point.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. A couple of sessions ago, I believe it was maybe 2019, Senator Settlemeyer had a bill that would allow people who were family members to help take care of those who might be mobility challenged, et cetera. Have you looked at working with DHHS and their age and disability services to see what you might be able to come up with as a baseline and then build on that? And perhaps that may even be something that could be applied for using ARPA dollars under senior citizens.
We have not done that yet. I remember Senator Settlemeyer's legislation, but we will look into that. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Members? I don't see Settlemeyer up there. Okay. And then I'll just wrap up with one question, Ms. Sewell, but I know I was really interested in kind of learning more about the challenges for Nevada small businesses, because obviously if they're facing challenges, and that puts at jeopardy jobs, right, for our constituents. And the more small businesses we have and the more thriving small businesses we have, the more jobs that are created in our area. And so, I know you guys said you were focusing on workforce, and then affordable housing came up a lot, but have you guys Are you guys going to be working on anything that we can help you with during the next legislative session to help with workforce development and affordable housing?
That's a great question, and we are currently looking at all of the initiatives that chambers from across the state, we collaborate with urban, Latin, Asian, and so forth. And I think there will be some workforce legislation that we could perhaps bring forward to you that I think, because a lot of times we're looking at trying to protect our employers during the legislative session from things that, they feel like are onerous. I think moving forward, what we're looking to do is identify those positive legislative efforts that we could potentially look at. So what we're looking at mostly is workforce development and resources. Our employers really say that they need those resources to be able to stay open right now. So not only are they looking for things like human resources, they're still looking for funding as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And if you would, I know you had mentioned that it's not out yet, the Workforce 3.0 blueprint,
Correct.
but if you would, if there's a possibility when it does come out, if you would share it with our committee so that I can share it, make sure to share it with the entire
Definitely.
subcommittee.
Will do.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you both for being here with us this morning. We are going to move on to the second part of agenda item number 7, which is agenda item number 7B, the Reno and Sparks Chamber of Commerce. And we have CEO Ann Silver with us to present.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Spearman and members of the Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor. I'm going to have our lobbyist, Tom Clark, make a few remarks first.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to take a minute to introduce Ann Silver to you all. Ann is the CEO. She has been the CEO since 2016. She's got a great track record, great history around the state. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from Cornell. She got her Doctorate of Law from the University of Notre Dame. Prior to joining the Chamber, I just learned this as we were sitting here waiting for our remarks. She was appointed by both Governors List and Bryan to head up Dieter. And I won't tell you what years those were. I'll let you guys figure that part out. Ann was actually the general manager of Radio City Music Hall in New York. On the business side of things, she was the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters. She was the executive director of Job Opportunities in Nevada, and she previously was an HR consultant to Sierra Nevada College. So it's been enlightening and encouraging today for me to watch all of these really strong women presenting all of the issues that we face with workforce. And so it's my pleasure to turn it over to Ann Silver.
Again, thank you. My name is Ann Silver. I do serve as the CEO of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce that represents 2,300 plus members, ranging in size from Tesla and Panasonic to smaller businesses that employ less than 10 people. Our members employ over 110,000 community residents. It's noteworthy that 74% of our members employ less than 100 individuals, and 38% of those employ less than 25 full-time workers. The subject of workforce is both alarming and complex as businesses large and small deal with the lack of workers, the departure of workers, and the continued pressure to raise wages, improve health benefits, and accommodate the growing leverage of employees. Our continued insistence on rampant growth, stimulated by large advanced manufacturing and technology companies moving from elsewhere to northern Nevada, has put a particular strain on small businesses that don't have sophisticated recruitment teams, marketing dollars, or time to do effective outreach for qualified personnel. These businesses that supply the goods and services we all rely upon have cut back on employees or reduced their operating hours due to staffing shortages. This is going on at the same time they've raised their wages in order to retain employees and have raised their prices in order to afford both compensation increases and the impact of inflation. But rather than focus on Nevada's worker shortage, we need to better understand the inextricable connection to other social factors that have impacted small business owners in our region. These include lack of accessible elder care and affordable child care resources, few and reduced mass transit options for those reliant on public transportation, the lack of affordable workforce housing, and a general shift in employee expectations about the workplace. Workers continue to leave their jobs in extremely high numbers, especially those in low-wage industries where most work must be done on site, such as leisure, food service, and retail. A record high number of workers have also quit in trade, transportation, and utilities at the start of 2022. Yes, many small businesses received CARES Act funding and survived closures. They abided by state mandates, conducted curbside commerce, and performed takeout and delivery only. Resilience, determination, and imagination enabled our members to survive the pandemic. And for the few small businesses we've seen close in Washoe County, we've seen double-digit growth in chamber membership each month as retirees, women, veterans, other minorities, and younger individuals strike out on their own and pursue the dream of opening a coffee bar, distillery, nail salon, or marketing firm. I can't sit before you and tell you there's a need for more funding or government support. What I will say is that Nevada needs to reckon with the rampant growth both in population, the demand for services, infrastructure and transportation improvements, and of course, workforce housing. We should hit the pause button, take a look at the infrastructure demands in cities designed for less than half the current population, and at the same time require companies coming to Nevada to build workforce housing, much like was done in the 1940s and 50s by General Electric and Ford Motor Company in the East and Midwest. Had we asked for this in 2014 when Tesla arrived, followed by requirements for additional corporations at the Tahoe Regional Industrial Center, we wouldn't have 6,500 employees clogging Interstate 80, 3 shifts each day, driving 60 miles round trip in single-occupied vehicles. Tax abatements and concessions granted at the state level have benefited the larger companies, while there is no such incentive for those pursuing a smaller carbon footprint, fewer employees, and producing the goods and products we all need and purchase every single day in our communities. Presently, there is an abundance of overlapping state agencies involved in workforce development and training, including the university and community college system, the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation, the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, the Governor's Workforce and Development Board, the Department of Education, the Department of Agriculture, Chambers of Commerce, Workforce Connections in Las Vegas, and Nevada Works in Reno, along with a large number of nonprofit organizations throughout Nevada funded by grants from the U.S. Department of Labor. The width of services statewide is wide, the deliverables quite elusive. Our chamber recommends a comprehensive audit of the many agencies involved in workforce development efforts and a true accounting of the use of millions of dollars we've received over the past 5 years to develop individuals for careers, not just jobs. Who is enrolled in the statewide federally funded training programs? How many complete training or educational certifications? And what is the starting wage upon placement? Most importantly, are we meeting these individuals where they are in their lives, requiring literacy and computer skills, accessible training locations in their neighborhoods, and case management to ensure individuals are placed in jobs with progressive career opportunities that can fulfill middle-class aspirations? Nevada depends primarily on an economy fueled by the working class, and while we continue to lure larger companies competing for open land, water, and employees, we've overlooked the very basics of our underlying revenue, the leisure, hospitality, and tourism sector. We are seeing over $1 billion per month in revenue from visitors, all of whom rely on competent front desk supervisors and managers, technology teams, chefs and culinary professionals, security personnel, licensed spa and salon employees, trained hoteliers, housekeeping supervisors, bartenders, transportation drivers, and more. In fact, we're completely dependent on these positions that can make or break our economy, along with every hotel, restaurant, spa, golf course, and stage show. The Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce is not opposed to economic development, but that's not to be confused with rampant development that puts the very essence of our communities, our geography, our climate, and our quality of life at risk. No one seems to favor a state income tax, property tax reform, or an increase in the sales tax. But if we're to educate, train, and create careers for our residents, we need to confront the urge to entice companies here with the false promises of qualified personnel, while recognizing the heavy lift already being performed by thousands of Nevadans in smaller businesses, whom we all rely upon to maintain the vitality of our communities. We ask that our small businesses, more than 90% of the businesses that exist in Nevada, are considered when drafting and approving legislation that might hinder or compromise smaller businesses' ability to thrive and expand. Please assume that our chamber will oppose any proposed legislation that fails to take into consideration accessible and affordable elder care and child care, available workforce housing, and reliable transportation, as these are significant predictors of the success of small businesses throughout our state. We appreciate the Chair's request that the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce be here today. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Silver and Mr. Clark, for your presentation. I'm going to go to Vice Chair first for questions, and we'll continue down here in Southern Nevada, and then we'll move up north.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Ms. Silver. How are you?
How are you? Fine,
Mr. Clark, how are you? So just a real quick question. I appreciate you bringing on the elder care piece because as I said before, I'm getting emails. People don't have children. Some do, but mostly they're trying to care for their parents. So quick question. I know that ARPA dollars, depending upon what bucket they're in, have some things that they can and cannot do. There's some restraints. Are there any dollars that are coming down the pike now or that you anticipate to come that might offer an opportunity to work with local governments using CDBGs, Community Development Block Grant Funds, and being able to leverage that with what needs to happen for workforce development? That's question number one.
Vice Chair Spearman, yes, I am aware of funding that could in fact be combined and help leverage the issue of both one end of childcare and the other end of elder care. And in fact, we're in conversations with the City of Reno, the City of Sparks, and Washoe County on how we can leverage those dollars to attend to those issues.
Next question would be, and I know there's probably a greater opportunity here because of Nellis, but any collaborations with some of the military institutions that are up north, maybe not directly in Reno Sparks area, but in some of the surrounding rural areas, with the advancement of force reduction in the military. That means, bringing the force levels down. With that advancement, many of the jobs have been turned over or have been converted to civilians. So is there an opportunity to partner with and collaborate with them in order to increase, to fill out those jobs? But more importantly, when they go to work for Department of Defense, they also receive training, and it's not at your expense.
Thank you for that question, Vice Chair. Yes, we work collaboratively with the Nevada National Guard, based right in Reno, and we do, in fact, work with the Fallon Naval Air Station, and we recognize that individuals coming out of the military are an important resource for workforce training. In fact, as mentioned before, they bring their skills and leadership and business acumen to the workplace, and so we work very collaboratively to ensure we are assisting those individuals, are directed to the appropriate resources, whether they be through DETR or the Chamber or other organizations, so they can be placed in viable opportunities in the workforce.
Last question. With respect to that, are there any programs that you might be using to collaborate with? Specifically, I'm thinking about mining because they've had a couple of workshops here in Las Vegas, working with mining. If not mining directly, then something associated with mining to entice people to come to work in that area. And I think Director Cafferetta mentioned something about the lithium industry. And I know that's a hot button topic. I understand that. But I'm just trying to see what resources we have available and what can be used to mitigate or eliminate those, the worker shortage on the one hand, and to my colleague's question about security, how that might help people get more financially secure, home secure, and that sort of thing.
Well, thank you for the question, Vice Chair. As mentioned by Ms. Seawald from the Vegas Chamber, the Reno Sparks Chamber, in combination with some other agencies, also have applied for the Economic Development grant known as the Good Jobs Challenge Grant. And we specifically cite mining as a great resource for employment, with the average wage starting at $60,000 per year. So we're very interested, and we've partnered with the Nevada Mining Association to focus on jobs in the mining industry that not only come with a middle-class wage or annual compensation, but with particular benefits and on-site childcare. And so we're extremely hopeful we get some or all of the money we've requested so that we can continue to train people for the expansion of mining, including perhaps lithium, and see those individuals have gainful employment, particularly in the rural communities where mining exists as one of the only viable job sectors. So I hope I've answered your question.
Members, any other questions? No, and I don't think we have any questions up north for you. And I have one. And it was something I flagged when you were giving your presentation. You talked a little bit about small businesses like having to scale back on outreach, like on recruiting efforts because they just don't have the time, right? So, I mean, it kind of sounds like one problem causing the same problem, which one comes first, right? They don't have the time. They're short-staffed, which is causing them to not be able to recruit more staff, which is keeping them short-staffed. But I mean, are there resources out there that small businesses can use? Like, how can we help these small businesses?
It's a good question.
That issue that they're facing
Sure.
when they need to recruit, but they don't have the time to recruit.
Right. I don't think it's a question of money or a grant or funding of any kind. You're looking at a kind of a Bermuda Triangle of issues going on right now. You have individuals who want to work, but childcare is more expensive than the money they might bring in from a job, so there's no ROI in them returning to work. You're looking at small business owners who are directly cutting the lettuce and making the sandwiches or serving the drinks, and they in fact do not have internal HR professionals who can help them do outreach. The Chamber itself has hosted 3 large job fairs at the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority, and that was very helpful to our small members, which make up such a significant portion of our membership. And we were able to open it up free of charge to any and all members and other small businesses, even if they weren't members of our chamber. And we had over 1,000 people show up, and we thought that was miraculous, that simply by offering a free job fair, there were 1,000 people, over 1,000 people who came. Over 400 people were offered jobs on one single day. And so we know the people are out there. Basing it at the convention center allowed it to be accessible on a bus route. We also provided childcare services for those folks who arrived with young children, understanding that childcare was one of the key issues that many of them have, and even looking for a job, much less maintaining a job. And so I think, we're in the thick of a national workforce shortage. Certainly, we're seeing more jobs that need to be filled in Nevada than we have people. And what we struggle with is the continued influx of population brought in for advanced manufacturing and other noteworthy jobs at the same time that small businesses are competing for those individuals and can very often offer a much more focused quality of life. You might be able to walk to work, ride your bike to work, have more accommodation from your employer, find nearby childcare where you can drop your child off. And so to answer your question, I think the Chamber is doing everything it can to align its members with all the various resources. And whether it's through Job Connect, and we're right across the street from them through Dieter, or it's through our own resources, our own webpage that has job availabilities posted by our members. We'll stay all day and night if we need to help people find jobs, and very often people will just drop by the Chamber. I kiddingly always say that most people don't know what an EDAWN or an RSCVA is, but everybody knows what a Chamber of Commerce is. And so we get hundreds of calls a day with people who are looking for work, looking for resources, looking for childcare, looking for affordable housing. And much like Mary Beth Seawald said, the Chambers withstood the pandemic. We were open every single day. We produced a briefing every single day that advised our members how to apply for loans, how to get PPP key equipment, what to do. We didn't miss a beat throughout the pandemic, and I'm not here representing all chambers, but much like my colleague, I can commend the 30 chambers in Nevada for doing what they could to assist every single one of their members, which more than likely was a small member in need of advice and education and information.
Thank you. And I'm going to actually bring it back to Vice Chair for a question.
Thank you. Here's one of the things that some legislation that we passed last session, I think was 50% by 30. With respect to our RPS, Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards. So there appears to be some opportunities, especially in the north, with respect to geothermal.
Yes.
And I know that Dr. Fold at UNR is a genius at that. So have you looked at maybe partnering with some of the academicians on trying to locate where that is and seeing how that can be expanded, because advanced manufacturing, geo is a magnet for them. So looking at that, and the other piece of that would be looking at how we might be able to further diversify the economy. Energy is currency. It's not just turn the lights on, but it's currency. So how might we be able to look at the total ecosystem around energy and see how we might be able to collaborate with the institutions that we have, not just up north, but down here, to make sure that all of that's coming together and we're leveraging every resource to get people back to work.
Thank you for your question, Vice Chair. Yes, the Reno Sparks Chamber is partnered with the University of Nevada, Reno, the Desert Research Institute, and in our Good Jobs Challenge grant, we highlighted solar, wind, geothermal jobs as tremendous prospects for the average individual looking for a job. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to have completed college to find a very outstanding job in the clean energy, renewable energy field that is right in our backyard. And certainly we're looking at that. We serve on several committees discussing, for instance, I'm on the governor's multimodal transportation committee, the city of Reno's multimodal transportation committee. I served on the governor's energy task force. We're very focused on the jobs that are occurring right now and will occur in our future regarding wind and solar and all the clean energy jobs, whether it's in public transportation, operating an electric bus. We know that the country needs 700,000 truck drivers. We'd like to see them driving electric trucks. So we're very much focused on the collaboration and the kind of communication we can provide to ensure that those jobs are out there for people, that they have access to them, that they don't feel intimidated by those jobs. They're not intimidated by the lack of higher education as a prospect to enter those fields. And so, yes, that's very much on our radar. And thank you for raising that question.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I just want to thank you for your presentation, for being here with us in person today, this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Tom Clark for the record, and I appreciate being in person as well. It's quite nice to see everybody's smiling faces. I was brought on to the Chamber team in February, and so I offer myself as a resource as you move forward and develop your bill draft requests. It's interesting that agenda actually says, what do we need? For a lobbyist, that's words of gold, right? Right now, what we need is just further collaboration, working with this committee, working with the other chambers. Let's solve these problems that we have on workforce. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And that was one of my goals with this interim committee, was making sure everyone knew who the stakeholders in every industry were and getting information on the needs of every industry. Thank you. Okay, members, on to our next agenda item. It is agenda item number 8, which is an overview of the Division of Financial Institutions from the Department of Business and Industry. As you recall, Senator Lang suggested the committee hear more about banking this interim. And so we have invited Director Terry Reynolds from the Department of Business and Industry and Sandy O'Laughlin, the Commissioner of the Financial Institutions Division at BNI, to provide an overview of the division to the committee. That will include its duties, the division licenses, and supervises depository, fiduciary, and non-depository financial institutions. Mr. Reynolds and Ms. O'Laughlin, when you're ready, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Hadegui, Vice Chair Spearman, and committee members. Terry Reynolds was flying down this morning, and I believe he's delayed because he's not here, but he really wanted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to present a brief overview of the Financial Institutions Division. I'm Sandy O'Loughlin, Commissioner, and with me to assist in answering the questions undoubtedly you're going to have is Michael Smith, the Examinations Manager. Slide 2. Next slide, does it? The FID is a division within business and industry. We license, regulate, and annually examine just over 1,400 financial institutions and license without examination approximately 1,000 individuals, making our division responsible for over 2,400 licensees under 13 statutes with full-time staff of 41 employees. 34 of our employees, around 83%, are focused solely on examinations. Our licensee types are broken down roughly by depository, fiduciary, and non-depository institutions. Depository examinations are conducted jointly when possible with examiners from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Federal Reserve for bank examinations, and the National Credit Union Administration, NCUA, or American Share Insurance for our credit union examinations. The division is currently short-staffed by 8 examiners. We actively recruit qualified candidates for those vacant positions. However, we continue to have difficulty in filling those positions. We are self-funded agents. We are a self-funded agency, and we generate revenue from our examinations conducted and billed on an hourly rate at least annually, more often if the prior examination is rated as a needs improvement or unsatisfactory. We also generate revenue from licensing activity, fees, and depository assessments paid by our state banks and state credit unions for their examination, supervision, and oversight based on the institution's asset size. One of the most important aspects of the FID is to maintain the integrity and of the financial institution system on behalf of the state of Nevada. Slide, please. Besides examinations, the division is responsible for processing and responding to written consumer complaints to ensure each complaint is addressed timely by the licensee. If needed, we ask for clarification from the respondents, including supporting documentation, as well as investigate possible violations within the state law. The division finds and alerts businesses to a possible unlicensed activity based on current statutes. We license and regulate in a fair and impartial manner. The FID is available to discuss and listen to business entities interested in starting a business or moving their business to Nevada. When asked, the FID is always willing to work with stakeholders on new legislation. We welcome all new laws and write regulations when necessary, following the rulemaking process to assist the industries. The FID partners with federal agencies and national organizations to ensure that we have the most current information and guidance available to us, whether it's for geopolitical, regulatory, or national risk concerns. Slide 4. Licensees population. As indicated on this slide, we are our current license types and associated numbers of licensees. The FID conducts examinations on the majority of our licensees annually for compliance with the state and federal laws and regulations and for safety and soundness. However, due to the rating of the examination, complexity, and size of the institution, we may conduct follow-up examinations throughout the year. We accomplish our examinations with only 34 examiners when fully staffed. At present time, the actual count is 26 examiners. Many of our examiners require certification, continuing education for recertification and testing. Most notable changes are to our fast-growing retail trust companies, taking advantage of the quickly growing cryptocurrency space. This brings new challenges to the division, not only for understanding the intricate business plans, but also in understanding the complexity and risk in the licensing and examination process. Recently, we have also grown in the money transmitter applications. This is mainly due to the advancement of virtual currency. This increases the risk and complexity at the time the FID spends on examinations. FID tries to join other states' examiners around the country in examining money transmitters so more focused, detailed, and risk-based examinations can be conducted. The FID is considering adopting and implementing the Conference of State Bank Supervisors model law into the Nevada law in the future. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I was expecting a full page.
Thank you. Thank you. And before I turn it over to Senator Lang, who I know will have questions for you, this was a presentation she requested, I'm just going to jump in and ask some questions that I think just for knowledge, which will probably help me understand Senator Lang's questions. But on your first page of the slide, Ms. O'Loughlin, I know you mentioned there's about 1,400 financial institutions and then 1,000 individual qualified managers. What would be like an example of an individual qualified manager?
Oh, that would be for our debt collectors. They're required to have a qualified manager on site.
Okay, and then on like 2 slides later, slide number 4, just to make sure I'm reading this right. So there's only 8 banks and 8 multiple branches, but only 8 licensed banks and 8 licensed credit unions and 1 savings?
State license. We have 8 licensed bank, 1 savings and loan, and 4 thrifts.
And these are state licenses?
State license and state credit unions.
And then for the fiduciary institutions, 26 retail trusts and 35 family trusts. Could you give me an example of what like a retail trust company is? And are they required to have brick and mortar buildings here or just a license?
And this is why I have Michael Smith.
Michael Smith, for the record. For your tradition or your retail trust, that's more your traditional trust company, and they handle things like, wills, trust, administering your trust, your revocable, irrevocable trust documents. And they offer many other services. And then the family trust companies are dedicated more to one wealthy family, which kind of administers their investments in-house. So they don't offer anything to the public.
Gotcha. Okay, and that was the extent of my questions. I'm going to go first to Senator Lang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a little bit of background. In the last legislative session, we had a group that wanted to bring their some of their business here for the IRAs, and we found that our state law didn't allow that to happen, and we had to change that state law. So it got me to looking at banking, and we haven't made changes to our banking regulations for a really, really long time. And so I appreciate Chair Howdicke, you bringing this to the committee. I've been meeting with quite a few groups for the last 6 months, I would say, about some of the changes that we need to have here in Nevada. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions that I would like to have put on the record that we've probably already discussed. But can you, how many new banks have we had come to Nevada recently?
I had a feeling this question would be asked. This is Sandy O'Loughlin for the record. In my tenure, which has only been 2 years, we have had one new de novo bank, and we have had 1 application for an ILC that didn't go through. That was 2019, I believe. And that's all we have for new.
And why would you say that we, it seems like we should have more people that want to come here. There's lots of opportunity. Why would you say that we've had 1 person in 2 years?
Sandy O'Loughlin for the record. I agree, Nevada is a great place to be. I think everybody should want to bank here. I bank here. But the reason, it's hard to say if there's just one reason. For the banks, we don't do that alone, right? It has to be, we share that with the FDIC. So if we say we can have a bank and the FDIC says we can't have a bank, we will not have a bank. But we work together and we partner with them, and we encourage people to give us their applications first so that we can go through it and make sure that what they really need is in there. It's very intricate. There's a lot to starting a bank or even and a credit union as well. And so if they give us a chance to go through it first, then we can help them along the way. But truly, the final is the insurer is who's going to make that final decision.
Do you mind if I keep going, Chair? Okay. And so I know that when I first moved to Nevada many years ago, we had a lot of community banks. And I've noticed as time has gone on, the community banks, which were primarily in the brown and black neighborhoods, have gone away. Do you have an idea why that's happening? And do you have many people come to you? Well, obviously not many, because we've had one bank in the last 2 years, but do you have interest in community banks? And is it too difficult? I mean, what are the barriers that have stopped us from having community banks?
Well, Sandy O'Loughlin, for the record, after the 2008-2009 crisis, a lot more was put in place to validate what banks were going to be doing, right? It wasn't, not that it was ever really easy to start a bank, but it is a little more difficult now. They do a lot, they go by a lot on the management and the management structure and years of experience. And there's just not as many bankers out there that want to go through that. To start, they can take on a job in another place. It takes a group of people that really want to start something in Nevada to start it. I went and looked up a statistic just before I came up here, and the FDIC in 2020 only had 15 de novo banks in the whole country open up. And in 2019, they had 9. 2018, they had 15. We had, I believe I looked back, and I don't know if this is an exact fact, but I believe in 2008, 2009, I think we had about 22 banks. Yeah? 22, 23 banks. We had quite a few, and now we're down to 8. So the crisis really put a strain on people who really want to start a bank. That's my personal opinion.
Do you think not having those banks in communities is a barrier to people that become unbanked because they're not in their communities?
Yes, Sandy O'Loughlin, I do. I think it's a misnomer. And same thing with our credit unions. They are more consumer driven. And we haven't had a new credit union, I think, in 20 years. Our credit unions are good about opening branches, though, in the areas in which they serve. So that's a good thing.
And then if I could move to a topic that maybe some people on this panel would know about, but the opportunity funds. And opportunity funds were money that was appropriated by the legislature, I believe, for minority and women-owned businesses to be able to access money. And during the recession, it was before the recession, and at the recession, that money went away, always promising to be put back in. Is there any conversation, because I think this is really important, that we help those communities? Is there any conversation about, from your department, about replenishing those funds and starting the opportunity loans that are available to women and minority-owned businesses?
Sandy O'Loughlin, that would likely be coming from the director's office. Terry Reynolds, my boss. And he has so many divisions underneath him. If they were working on something like that, I am not aware of it, but I'm sure if there is something, he's working with one of the other divisions.
Okay, that's all I have for now, Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And maybe we'll see the director. Hopefully his flight makes it. And if he does, we'll give him an opportunity to answer that. Do we have any questions from Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have just a real quick question. Last session, I had a bill, Senate Bill 145, that dealt with the Community Reinvestment Act, and there was supposed to be, it was effective upon passage and approval. So there's supposed to be training conducted with 501c3s and other organizations as to how they might be able to work with banks on their CRA items. Has that begun? And if so, what does the training consist of? And if not, do you have a start date? And the last one, it's a test after this, okay? The last one would be this. How many people have you reached out to in the 501c3 era? And that's organizations, that's faith community, et cetera, because I think some of that may help with what my colleague, what Senator Lang is talking about. So can you just go over, where are we with Senate Bill 145?
Senate Bill 145, sorry, Sandy O'Loughlin. Senate Bill 145 went through, I believe it was October 31st was the start date. And there really wasn't sufficient time for banks to do training by the time we had to do our first reporting, which was, I think, January, February of 2022. It's every other year. So we don't have much on the training. We didn't really expect we'd have much on the training because it was just the last 2 months of the year. We did have the reporting, and we did submit that to the committee.
Thank you. Yeah, and so it was my understanding when we worked on the bill that the training wouldn't be accomplished, right after the 31st, but at least some plans would be in place for that. And the second piece of that was making sure that the outreach was there to the community and faith-based organizations so that they would understand the opportunities to work with banks on that CRA, because that too applies to their credit, applies to their rating from the FDIC. And I guess the last part of that would be posting something on your website as to either coming soon, this is going to be available, or if there is a CRA rating, that can happen. So does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Sandy O'Loughlin, we do post the ratings on our website. I don't think it required that we post the trainings, just the ratings. And we have posted those on the website, and it shows how they were rated.
Yeah, and I wasn't speaking about the training per se on the website, but just to talk about a little bit about CRA so that people understand that it's coming forward. And if you're not doing that, do you have an outreach plan to community and faith-based organizations to tell them about this? Anything from email to word of mouth or something like that. A lot of times some of the best places to do that are in religious institutions, because a lot of people go there for their information. Just a question.
Sandy O'Loughlin, I believe that the institutions themselves, the banks themselves, were reaching out to those organizations in order to provide the training that would be required. There was a little confusion on what the training actually was, but it's on what CRA is, and that's a little difficult process to understand. I mean, on the get-go for even bankers, never mind consumers. So we were relying on the institutions themselves to reach out to those communities.
Thank you, members. Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. O'Loughlin. We appreciate you being here with us this morning. Send our regards to Director Reynolds. Okay, members, our next agenda item is agenda item number 9, a presentation on financial literacy reforms and safeguards for Nevada's senior citizens. We have President and CEO of the Nevada Bankers Association, Phyllis Gergovich, here with us this morning. Good morning, Ms. Gergovich. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. The floor is ready. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Give me 1 second to figure this PowerPoint. Okay, well, thank you for your patience. Again, my name is Phyllis Gergovich. I am President and CEO of Nevada Bankers Association. Thank you, Chair, for having me. Thank you, Senator Lang. Really appreciate you pulling in this attention onto the banking industry. And the topic I get to speak on is financial literacy, as well as some reforms and safeguards for Nevada's senior citizens. So I wanted to change the slide. I wanted to start with a real quick look at financial literacy in general in Nevada. And Nevada has really demonstrated that they are dedicated to financial literacy for folks living here in Nevada. One indication of that dedication is that our students in the Nevada school system will receive financial literacy training throughout their career or throughout their school years, beginning in grade 3. And that's thanks to championing of Senator Woodhouse, the support of many of you and many of our legislators. Additionally, beyond the education years, Nevada developed a financial literacy advisory council, and that council works to make sure that teachers have the resources they need for implementing those education requirements. And they don't stop there. They've dedicated themselves to finding education resources for Nevadans of all ages. Financial literacy is something that stays with you and you keep learning throughout your life. In high school, you may be concerned about paying for higher education or your next step entering the independent living and purchasing an automobile. Then you move into purchasing a house, and each of these takes a bit of financial savvy. And as we work as a state to educate our folks, we also want to be cognizant about protecting both our money and our personal identity. So that's an important aspect of financial literacy, is that role of fraud awareness and protection. So where we were going to zoom in today was on the elderly population. When it comes to fraud and exploitation, our elder population is at the greatest risk. There are a couple of reasons for this. Characteristically, the aging population, older folks, are more polite, more trusting, more respectful of authority. Additionally, not to be too punny, but they're a rich target. The elderly have often acquired financial resources, homes, savings. They have a good credit, so their personally identifiable information is valuable to fraudsters. If someone is exploited or becomes a victim of fraud, an elderly person reporting that to the authorities, there's a tougher time getting really good details in order to investigate. There's also a hesitancy to report, fear from the elderly person about how their family members will react. And then not last, but the last thing I'll touch on is that sometimes folks are unaware that they've been a victim until it's far too late. So the elder population is a growing target also in terms of there are more we have a larger number of elderly folks each year. And our criminals and our fraudsters, they use both fraud and exploitation to take advantage and financially harm these folks. Fraud being the tricksters, the scammers, the callers who trick you into actually giving your valuables away, and exploitation being the illegal taking, typically done by a family member or a new friend or stranger, or even companies that set up that are not legitimate and take advantage. So our financial institutions work with the elderly. They're customers. They come into the branches. They know their tellers. And we've been able to work with other stakeholders and identify some of the red flags. A teller may see a customer come in with a new friend that's never come into the branch with them before, or there may be an unusual large amount of money being wired when this customer has never conducted a wire transfer before. And so we keep a list and do training so folks in the industry are aware of what are those red flags. And more importantly is, what do you do when you see a red flag? So financial institutions in Nevada have a reporting duty. In 2007, Nevada passed AB 87, and that has a couple of requirements relating to those red flags and what to do when you see a red flag. It requires the reporting of an exploitation, of suspected exploitation, to an agency, and they are reported to either the Aging Services of the Department of Health, to the police or sheriff or to the protective services if they're available in that county. In addition to reporting, the institutions have an obligation to train all of their employees that might come in contact or approve transactions for vulnerable populations. They also identify a lead person or employee or team of employees to take these claims and to work with law enforcement and the authorities. So while our financial institutions and our bank employees are grateful to be helping to protect the elderly, oftentimes we find that it might be too late. So it can prevent further transactions and it can prevent further exploitation by making these reports and having the authorities investigate. But if there was a large wire or if there was a large withdrawal of cash, there are a lot of times when there's no ability to claw that back. Law enforcement can't find out who those funds actually went to, and we're stuck. And so the person who's been victimized, they may be protected for future transactions, but there's a loss experienced. So when Senator Lang started talking to us about what could be done, are there further abilities, we started thinking about transaction holds. And in our research, we found out that there are 38 states that allow broker-dealers and investment advisors to put a transaction hold if they suspect that it's an exploitive or fraudulent transaction. And additionally, in recent years, 12 states have either already or are in the process of allowing retail banking institutions to have that transaction hold as well. And so we would, it would be an opportunity to put a pause on a suspicious transaction. Rather than processing the transaction and reporting it, it's the ability to put a pause button, let the authorities conduct an investigation, and then decide should that transaction move forward, or the authority then can be granted an additional hold period. So the key provisions are different from state to state. The initial transaction hold by the financial institution varies between 5 and 10 days, and then the additional hold varies between 15 and 20 more days. But the key provisions are pretty much the same. We already have the reporting that would remain intact. We already have the designation of lead teams at the financial institution. We have the training going on. We have the protections so that those that are making these reports don't face civil or criminal prosecution. And it looks like we would have an opportunity to discuss adding that transaction hold in certain circumstances. I didn't put a questions slide up, but I'm happy, Chair, to answer any questions the group might have.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start with committee members. Senator Lang.
Thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate your commitment to helping make this better in Nevada. Are your training materials for financial literacy bilingual?
Phyllis Gergovich for the record. The banks that do provide financial literacy and sources do have multi-language resources available. It varies by institution and also there are a lot of financial literacy agencies. We've got Junior Achievement in our state, and they all provide a variety of financial literacy training resources and in multiple languages, yes.
Thank you. And do you also have partnerships with you mentioned K-12, but I'm wondering about higher ed? If you have partnerships with higher ed to be able to do financial literacy training for them as well?
That's a great question. Our banking association doesn't currently. The relationships we do have with higher ed are for workforce development and actually adding layers of banking programs so that folks that are interested can get into as a career. But that's a great point.
Thank you.
Okay, and it doesn't look like we have any other questions. But I do want to make a comment. I know that this is an area of interest for Senator Lang, but maybe an opportunity for a committee bill as well if looking at what the 10 other states have done in doing the transaction holds. The timing couldn't be more perfect. I was sitting out to lunch with a friend who got a call from his mother-in-law who has been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and dementia, and she had just received a call from somebody saying they were collecting donations for a police department, and then immediately, and gave her credit card information and bank information, they immediately got a call from her banking institution asking if she had made almost $1,000 purchase at Apple and then a $1,000 purchase at Walmart right after. And so, I mean, I think that having the holds is something that could protect some of our most vulnerable populations. So thank you. I appreciate you being here. Ms. Gergovich, it doesn't look like we have any other questions for you. I appreciate your, I do have a comment from Vice Chair.
How you doing, Ms. Gergovich? So I guess my question would be, the literacy classes after COVID. A number of people are getting back into the workplace, and I got an email from someone, I opened it this morning, and the question that they had was one about finances, and I'm going to say they were probably late 30s or 40s, but didn't have the same level of information for financial literacy. Are you all looking at anything in terms of literacy, financial literacy after COVID? Because a lot of people were probably not prepared before COVID, but now after COVID to be prepared when the next pandemic hits.
I think that's a great perspective, and I do know that the Financial Advisory Council on Financial Literacy is looking at those adult populations, and that's a great recommendation.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Ms. Gergovich. It was so nice to see you in person. Okay, committee members, our next agenda item is agenda item number 10, a presentation on community development financial institutions, CDFIs, and the community unbanked in Nevada. I believe we have Executive Director Nick Steele with us for the presentation. Mr. Steele, when you're ready.
Just one moment.
You can see your presentation, Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Senator Lang, as well as the committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to have this important discussion regarding the unbanked households in our state and how we can collectively offer solutions to reduce their use of alternative and often high-cost services. The presentation today covers three main areas. We'll start with a brief overview to provide some context and background on the subject. Then we'll move into some potential solutions. I'll end with how key stakeholders in the financial services industry and broader community can benefit from taking action. So who are the unbanked? People who do not use mainstream financial services such as checking or savings accounts and primarily conduct transactions in cash when using alternative financial services like payday lending or check cashing are considered unbanked. For the purposes of our discussion, we want to understand the differences between unbanked and underbanked. However, in spite of the distinct differences between the two groups, they are often identified and treated the same, as we shall do here. The term underbanked means that the household had a checking or savings account with an FDIC-insured institution, but regularly used alternative financial services. The underbanked households represent a larger piece of the pie than unbanked. In fact, nearly 20% of all Americans are underbanked. In 2019, the FDIC conducted a survey of household use in financial services and found Nevada to have the highest use of a non-bank credit at 10.7%. Many estimates suggest the percent of unbanked and underbanked to be around 30%. Many of these services are used by lower and moderate income workers because they offer advantages that traditional banking institutions do not. Examples include payday loans, money transfers, refund anticipation loans, and non-bank check cashing. Money orders are the most frequently used alternative financial service. Payday loans are small, short-term loans offered to individuals who can prove an employment history. These loans are quick and easy to get. They are often used to pay outstanding utility bills and other ordinary living expenses, such as rent and groceries. Payday loans are usually offered with a very high interest rate, which can lead to long-term debt for borrowers. Being banked isn't just an adjective. It is, in fact, a critical component of financial stability. Having and using a basic bank account both facilitates critical everyday transactions and at the same time provides a core foundation for other financial services. Transactionally, a bank or a credit union account enables people to deposit earnings quickly and securely, pay bills easily, make everyday purchases safely, and save for the future, all at a lower cost than alternative financial services such as check cashers and payday lenders. It's understandable to ask the question why people are and remain unbanked. If using alternative financial services such as if using alternative financial services or cash is more expensive and less safe, why would someone opt to remain without an FDIC-insured account at a reputable financial service provider? Well, there's been some research conducted to build a more complete understanding of the financial attitudes and goals of unbanked people, and to explore the most effective messaging that could drive the adoption of more mainstream account services. In addition, this research can provide insight useful to financial institutions, financial counselors, and other stakeholders to convince people of the benefits of banking. The research revealed a number of important findings that contradict persistent myths about banking access. To highlight some of the false conclusions being made, let's dig deeper with a game of fact versus myth. The best way to convince unbanked people about the importance of a bank account is to emphasize how it will help them achieve important life goals like home ownership or owning a business. Is this fact or is this a myth? It's a myth. In reality, those who are unbanked respond far more favorably to ways in which a bank account can help them where they currently are to establish a strong financial foundation than they do to long-term aspirational goals related to banking access. These short-term goals specifically include building savings, decreasing debt, and building an emergency fund. Here's another one. Those who are unbanked are more likely to be successfully engaged through technology solutions than banking applications. Is this a fact or is this a myth? Again, this is a myth. In reality, specific tangible features related to securing their money is found to be the most important to unbanked people. In surveys and focus groups, respondents were asked about their financial goals and how they related to having a bank account. Generally, respondents agreed that aspirational long-term goals, like owning a home or starting a business, were important, but rated short-term immediate goals like improving credit, getting out of debt, and creating an emergency fund as more compelling. Overall, respondents indicated that it was important to establish solid financial footholds and take care of basic financial needs first before thinking about the longer term. Across both English and Spanish speakers, respondents highlighted characteristics like fraud protection, no overdraft fees, no minimum balance fees, and the ability to lock a stolen debit card as the most important benefits. Unbanked people wanted to feel secure that once their money is in an account, it will stay there. In addition, respondents cited access to a debit card and the ability to automatically deposit a paycheck through direct deposit as important benefits. Also notable are the least compelling benefits of having a bank account, according to focus groups of unbanked people. Okay, so now we've identified the important products and services communicated by the market we are hoping to engage, and we've identified how this community wants and responds to possible engagement and messaging. But this really doesn't address the core issue of why people remain unbanked. The same research went a step further and asked individuals why they did not have a bank account. Survey respondents cited not enough money to keep in an account, high fees, and lack of trust about banks as reasons for not having an account. Most of those who had a bank account in the past but had closed it cited fees like overdraft and minimum balance or loss of direct deposit from a job as the top reasons for choosing the account, for closing the account. Focus group participants said that bank accounts could be helpful if they had enough money in the future, but did not see how an account could help them in their current financial situation. Across both English and Spanish-speaking audiences, and despite complicated perceptions about banks, research found that over 2/3 of those surveyed were open to changing their minds about banks through messaging, and this was especially true for people who had previously had and then closed a bank account. So now we've peeled back some of the underlying reasons why people are and will remain unbanked. As a society, we know that having a large percentage of banks in our community acts as a drag on the economy in a number of ways. One way is by hastening the reduction of disposable income for those without much of a cushion. In other words, without the exorbitant fees associated with alternative financial services, that same disposable income could circulate in our economy, supporting small businesses, job creation, educational aspirations, and household investments. The biggest reason for remaining unbanked may stem, at least in part, from concerns about the fees associated with bank accounts. However, the cost of remaining unbanked generally outweighs the cost of bank fees, but the fees associated with alternative financial products are often on display, even if they are not completely clear. For instance, when you walk into a check cashing store, a board with transaction fees is displayed above the window. Similar to prices at a gas station, people can see what they're buying. Similarly, getting a money order at a grocery store or other retail establishment has a clear cost that is posted. Compare this with bank fees. While the information on monthly maintenance fees, overdraft fees, minimum balances, and ATM fees are all available online, which assumes the potential customer has good internet access, every bank website places this information in a different spot, making it more difficult to determine what to expect from any specific institution or account. Alternatively, potential customers can ask a bank branch for a brochure outlining the specifics of an account, but they will likely have to read through some fine print to determine the fee structure. For individuals who worry that they don't have enough money to make a bank worthwhile, and for those who are distrustful of banks, the differences between the clearly posted but incomplete fees at alternative financial service providers and the difficult to find fees at banks make the choice an easy one. Go for the alternative financial service so you know what you're getting into. Couple the disparity in pricing transparency with the structural barriers to opening an account at a mainstream bank, and the issue compounds. For example, in areas known as bank deserts with few to no bank branches, accessing services in person means people must travel out of their neighborhoods, which is costly and time-consuming. Additionally, bank hours can make it hard for people who work long days or have multiple jobs to find time for a visit. Contrast this with check cashing or check cashers and gas stations that seem to be open on every corner in some communities. Services are instant, easy, and always available. In addition, check cashers who know their customers personally may be able to exercise more discretion than bank tellers. For those who cannot wait for a check to clear before accessing their funds or understand the terms of a bank account, it's not hard to understand why financial management via alternative financial services products is more immediate and appealing. Better tailored banking products could reduce the fees and other barriers that keep these communities away from banks and pave the way for wealth creation. Understanding both the perceived and real challenges banking presents to households with low and volatile income could help financial institutions meet their needs. So what can we do? The ecosystem of financial institutions in Nevada is strong. Led by Phyllis Gergovich, president of the Nevada Bankers Association, several financial institutions have joined the Bank-On Coalition. Institutions offering Bank-On certified accounts offer benefits such as no account minimums, no overdraft options, no NSF fees, monthly fees less than $10, and waived with direct deposit. These efforts can be supported by the legislature to further promote the benefits of the Bank-On products. It's one thing for banks to offer products that benefit consumers, but it's another thing to find ways to reach the target market in a manner in which is receptive to the intended audience. As another way to understand how to best convince unbanked people about the benefits of banking, in research recently conducted, respondents were shown one of two versions of an image that illustrated the Bank-On features. Respondents were then asked to evaluate each feature across its appeal, how it affected their intent to learn more, and how it affected their considerations to open a bank account. This is important because often messaging is marketed without understanding how that messaging is being interpreted. And this research gives us some insight into how the unbanked perceive the potential outreach efforts. Across both images, no surprise fees was highest rated and performed much better than low cost. Fear of fees, especially overdraft fees, is a critical barrier to account opening. Therefore, respondents preferred messages that countered this fear directly. Here's an example of marketing an ad utilizing the features valued by the unbanked consumer. Understanding that unbanked consumers prefer messages that directly counter their fear of fees, this ad explicitly highlights no overdraft fees, period. Through fraud that drained account balances or through unpredictable overdraft fees, losing control of their money represents a critical barrier to unbanked people's desire to open a bank account. While much of this work in the banking access field has focused on specific financial products or the mechanisms to connect unbanked people to them at scale, there's been little research to date about how actually to make the case to unbanked people about the value of a bank account. Some research has found that while unbanked people have complicated and often negative attitudes towards banks, compelling messaging can indeed move them towards more favorable attitudes and increase their motivation to open a bank account. Specifically, messages about tools for easy banking, how bank accounts can help maintain control over their money, and how bank accounts can achieve short-term financial goals were the most compelling to unbanked people. Okay, so now we know what the issue is, and we know what's important and how to communicate to the community we are looking to reach. The next step is mapping out the actionable steps that can be taken to address this issue. What these insights suggest is that with a targeted approach, financial institutions could design new products and services or utilize existing Bank-On standards, along with more effective distribution models that would enable them to reach families that are being poorly served or not served at all. The solution doesn't just rest on banks. A more effective approach involves the entire ecosystem. Here's an outline of an action plan that could be used to address this issue being discussed. The Nevada Bankers Association can select 2 to 4 banks with coverage across the state, overlapping with the most unbanked areas of the state. These banks would offer Bank-On certified accounts. These banks would also commit to marketing Bank-On products in the areas in which the unbanked reside. Marketing would be in grocery stores, on the radio. Exploring alternative distribution channels could make banking products and services easier to use. This might mean forming partnerships with retailers, restaurants, or public transit companies. The Bankers Association would also develop an all-encompassing yet enriching website describing the benefits of the Bank-On accounts, with clear products, pricing, and links to open an account. The state government agencies could identify employees presently using check cashing services for payroll and utilize already existing databases within payroll departments to encourage conversion of employees using alternative financial services to Bank-On accounts. The state can market Bank-On features in public venues and locations such as parks, libraries, and post offices. In addition to mirroring some of the initiatives proposed at the state level, local municipalities can help stem the continuation of unbanked from one generation to the next. Cities and counties can embed financial empowerment into summer youth employment programs. They can leverage the infrastructure of summer youth employment programs to offer banking access and offer financial empowerment opportunities, effectively transforming a summer job into an on-ramp to the financial mainstream. Community organizations can do something similar, working with summer youth employment programs. Additionally, I see the slideshow actually was a little bit switched. So for the local government, just to kind of reiterate, they can mirror some of the initiatives proposed at the state level by incorporating financial empowerment programs into the summer youth employment programs. They can leverage the infrastructure of summer youth employment programs by offering banking access and other financial empowerment opportunities. I'll just switch. Large employers can also identify employees presently using check cashing services for payroll and utilize payroll departments to encourage conversion of employees using alternative financial services to bank-on accounts. They too should be encouraged to convert payroll processing from issuing checks to direct deposit. The savings would flow directly to their bottom line while helping their employees regain their financial foothold. Lastly, but integrally, CDFIs such as Access Community Capital can assist in coordinating the communication and implementation of the program goals across the various stakeholders. We can facilitate the reporting and record keeping to assess the success of the program. Further, our involvement can act as the voice of the target market, addressing concerns throughout the process and identifying necessary pivots in strategy. This concludes today's presentation. I don't have the question slide either. However, I'm very open to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. I'm going to turn to the committee members first to see if they have any questions. Senator Lang.
Thank you for this presentation, Mr. Steele. I can tell you that I know someone on this program, someone who was young and made lots of mistakes and never thought they'd ever be able to bank again. And to have the opportunity to bank and to have that part of their life was instrumental. And to not only just having that opportunity, but feeling successful, right? So I really like this, and I will talk to you more about it, Phyllis, and look forward to helping this move on.
Thank you, Senator. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Steele, or afternoon. So I guess the question, we've talked a lot about workforce development and emerging industries, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a piece on here about employers. Have you looked ahead to see how you might be able to work with organizations that have presented today, Dieter, the chambers, that sort of thing, as more people begin to enter the workforce? This could probably be a real good opportunity to assess exactly what the needs are, as well as predict what the trajectory might be in the future based upon salaries. Most of the jobs that are coming in, if they deal with energy or climate change, et cetera, they're going to be well-paying jobs. And for people who have not had that much money, it's like my dad used to say, you put it on a slide. It's not how much money you make, it's how much money you save. So are you looking at doing some type of a partnership with them? And I can't speak for them, but for those who represent the banking industry, but it could be an opportunity to work through the CRA goals.
As always, I think you make some excellent points. And I think as a state, we're attracting more and more employers and companies. It's important to think about how that relationship filters down to the rest of the community, but do so at the beginning of those conversations. And so in some of the conversations earlier today, there were some interesting points in terms of how to work with employers without giving away the vote, right? we can actually bring large employers to the state, but still outline some requirements that would also benefit those employers, but also, more importantly, not leave behind the individuals and the communities in the state in which we would be consumers.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Committee members? And seeing no questions up north, Mr. Steele, thank you so much for being here with us. I mean, an important topic, something that's near and dear to my heart. I worked at a financial guidance center where one of the things we did was work with the unbanked population and help them get on a good financial road course. So thank you. I appreciate you being here and for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, committee members. Our next agenda item is a public comment, agenda item number 11. As a reminder, we ask that public comment be kept to 3 minutes so that everyone interested in speaking can have time to speak. A person may also submit public comment in writing by mail to the research division, by fax or email. All of those can be found on the committee's agenda. I'm going to start with public comment for those here in person in Las Vegas. We will move to Carson City. Then we will take public comment over the phone. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment? Seeing none, BPS, do we have anyone on the telephone line wishing to give public comment?
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to give public comment, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers or public comment at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Members, any comments from our members? Okay, seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled for May 3rd, 2022, beginning at 9 a.m. We are adjourned. Thank you, members.